Maloilele, Talofalava, Pulavinaka, Kia ora, aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this beautiful day from Auckland, New Zealand, South Side. It's a beautiful day here, still nice and warm here in New Zealand. We're looking to do another episode for today, and we're very happy to uh, be with you guys all today. Tua, how's everything going on your end, man?
It's beautiful here in South Central Texas, 72 degrees in wintertime. Reminds me why I'm living in Texas, right? Because, well, everybody up north is talking about how cold it is. We're down here basically in beautiful weather. So, yeah, everything's going great. Donald Trump
Nice.
still running the show, and our governor here in his wheelchair is still killing it as well. So, Texas is still number one in job creation opportunity. So
In
everything in
all
the
the
Lone
states.
Star State, in all the
In all
states.
the states.
Yeah,
Wow. Wow. So everything's going good down there in the good old USA, yeah?
100%. So things are going well here. A lot of excitement, a lot of business is coming down. So we're feeling pretty good about ourselves, Mr. Atearoa.
Nice. Nice. Awesome. Just want to let all the viewers know that we're coming live on YouTube, Facebook, Patreon, and also Instagram. And also our favorite Elon Musk on his platform X. We're all live on those platforms. Good to bring you Polynesian Eyes podcast, a digital live cover session for today. But yeah,
Yes, 100%. Got a comment here from Tease. He says, just found out about
oh,
this channel. Appreciate the work you guys have done. I recently dug into the work of Solomon Pele Oholani's Hawaiian genealogy. Hey, not
oh,
familiar with
cool,
that
cool, geez,
Tease. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. We might
Maria.
have to check him
Nice,
out.
yeah, nice.
You familiar with Solomon Masi or heard any about his
No, no,
genealogical work?
no, and tease. If you just keep emailing and message us, we are interested to know about that. Because I have no idea.
Awesome. So Tease responds against found out that he believed in Hawaiians migrating from Alaska, which is very interesting. Kind of lines up with your dad's logic of coming from America. Yes, a
Hey,
lot of that knowledge is interesting.
that's pretty interesting. Yeah. No, and I was gonna say, I don't think we've had any one of our viewers kind of share that idea to of Alaska. Love that it's been kind of like that California coast with some certain
Mhm.
names of the Native American tribes to Polynesia, but Alaska, that's new. Tease, that's
Yeah,
interesting, man.
now that T's bringing up of that the kind of some of the major details, I do remember seeing a gentleman making a presentation somewhere on YouTube or somewhere on social media where he was kind of walking over some of the reasons why he had that. I want to say maybe it was some of the fish hooks and fishing
Mm,
techniques or something like that, and then some other things as well. So, but appreciate that, Tease. Appreciate that.
nice.
One more comment. He says, "I wonder if Alaska logic is stemming from the bird um, that migrates from there." Wow, interesting. I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, I think I did hear something about what T's mentioning some flock of birds that migrate between Alaska and Hawaii. I don't know the name T's, but I did hear something like that. That it's
Okay,
one of like the longest journeys for any flock of birds to
to
migrate.
make that.
Yeah, from one land nonstop from Hawaii to Alaska. So I did hear something
Okay,
about that. If that's what you're talking about, T's, but that's just something I've kind of remembered.
no, 100%. So we do for today's show. We're going to walk through a couple studies that we found. One is a study on the oral histories in Ha'amoa and kind of looking at some of the patterns, some of the
Nice.
conclusions that they came across from there. The other one is about stone, volcanic flakes, and kind of the patterns that they found. And we're going to have maybe, kind of look at those two things and see what kind of ideas may pop up from that. But before we do, we're going to just do a little political summary of some of the political leadership challenges. We'll call them challenges that
Mm-hmm.
are going on in our native islands across the Pacific.
Polynesian. Nice.
Yes. Hey, Water Bears. Welcome, Water Bears, to the digital
Hey, water
conversation.
bears. Always good to have you,
Um,
bro.
says Alaskan tribes do have an Asian look similar to the Hawaiians. Si, ogukehe Asian yako ya Water Bears.
The Hawaiians one is much more recent
Recent.
water bears.
Yeah. That's the one who came with Takatsu and Calbee
Yeah,
and stuff.
and the
Hey.
dumplings and all
And
of
the
that.
dumplings. Hey, malo,
Pork
malo, Water
bun.
Bears. Clap, clap. Atafoyipu fonu ka Water Bears.
Let's go.
T says it's the colea bird or
Mm,
the golden plover.
that must be the
Yes.
one, geez, Maro. Yes, I think that's the one I'm thinking of. That
Yo,
that's that big
malo,
migration.
malo. So with that being said, let's start with, we discussed this issue. I want to say issue here. Yeah. uh, This story about with our interview with uh, John
Mm,
Loau a little bit. It looks like Mr. Brown from the Cook Islands survived the no confidence vote. So, for all intents and purposes, the Cook Island government, remember, I was thinking, man, is this guy acting like a rogue, right?
yes.
Is he kind of doing something that people don't agree with? So, this now says that the Cook Islands prime minister, who's doing a deal directly with China, kind of leaving New Zealand in the dark. New Zealand thinks they belong in the
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
He survives it. So that kind of makes it seem like this is not just a rogue guy doing his own thing.
No.
There might be some general support, at least from the parliament and
Yeah.
possibly by the Cook Island population. So this thing
Right.
makes things a little interesting. Any comments on that, Masi?
No. No. I think the COVID 2020 has really made leaders, especially people who rely on tourism, like the Cook Islands, that
Ah,
they need to move to do something that
to be in
can't
control of their own destiny.
control of their own destiny. Exactly, because COVID really hurt
Mm.
everybody. And if you didn't learn anything from COVID, that means you've gone back. That's the definition of insanity. You went back to do the same thing. But Cook Islands, they've learned something that one, you need to probably diversify your economy. Cook Island is just simply a tourism sector of its economic part of its nation. So Cook Islands, now that we've come out of that, and this Prime Minister of Cook Islands is, he's doing a political calculation, moving towards building for the future, which probably involves a heavy investment from China. So
Mm.
that's what I'm thinking, and that's me wearing the Cook Islands hat. That's what I'm thinking. I would just keep going because me personally, I don't think New Zealand will do anything to threaten their ties to the Cook Islands or anything. And until they do, then maybe you can start negotiating. But he's talking a tough game at the moment. So
Yeah, because literally, like this title of the article says the Cook Islands PM is condemning New Zealand government for interference in
mm,
foreign affairs, right?
hmm,
But New Zealand is making the opposite. They feel like we're not being involved and they should have been consulted in the
correct.
foreign affairs. But you brought up an interesting point, Masi, and this is what made me think of. We did that one video of ABC News, I think, that was looking
Yeah.
into what were the drivers for the New Zealand government going right,
Hmm.
right? And they looked, a lot of it was anti Jacinda, and a lot of the stuff that she did that's
Yeah.
causing the New Zealand government, which is you can say the populace, the people, to move more to the right because of the heavy handedness and the strictness on which they handled COVID. There is now they're having this conversation. Could be a result. Cook Islands is the
Mm,
same thing, like you said, because New Zealand was so heavy-handed in how they handled COVID, right?
yeah.
And because they're so heavily dependent on tourism, they may have felt like, hey, look, we can't, this is our biggest livelihood and we don't even have control of it.
Mm,
New Zealand can dictate to us how
yeah,
we behave, what we can and cannot do, which is could be one of who knows how many other reasons. But this could be another side effect, just like the New Zealand government going more to the right. This could be another side effect of Jacinda's leadership and the heavy handedness of how COVID was handled. Like you're
yeah.
saying, I
No,
think there's some truth to that.
yes. That's probably what happened to it. Like, they really felt the brunt and the tough times. I think Cook Islands suffered. A lot of their population left the Cook Islands to back to New Zealand, and not only that, they were in a shortage of like people to work in the resorts and hotels. So they did a heavy immigration plan to bring Fijians. So a lot of the Fijian uh, people are working in the resorts now in the Cook
Oh,
Islands.
okay.
So
Bringing
you
the
know, this
labor
is all
force.
part, yes, because of the COVID situation. It really hurt. So I think, like I said, this just opened a lot of minds and maybe created some political will to try to do something different instead of going back to the um same thing. So yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, and maybe too, also another kind of big thing, the Cook Islands is kind of what they're really driving in all of the Pacific is the seabed mining.
Yeah, the
Do
deep
you
sea
have
mining. Yeah.
deep sea mining? You know, I don't really know too much of that. Do you have any idea or knowledge if seabed mining is a real economic opportunity? That's, the opposition to that is you're gonna decimate a lot of the ocean
Habitat and
life
natural
and
environment.
habitat.
Yeah.
Yes, a natural environment for the fishes and corals in the ocean. But I don't know. Do you have anything on that? The
Yeah,
seabed
we
mining to
we we discussed it like a few months ago last year when it came up, and it's serious. I mean, it's not cheap, right?
Mm,
If they're going to do this, they need foreign investment, and so they were talking to private capital, private companies that were going to come in and provide the capacity and the capability to do the deep sea mining, to get whether it's rare minerals like gold or whatever, or
mm,
even some other rare things like cobalt for batteries and stuff. I can't remember all the details, but there's
yeah.
sufficient enough deposits and stuff that would justify the investment into the infrastructure. And there was private money that was willing to come and fund that. So for me, once you get the private sector, that doesn't mean it's guaranteed, but at least there's some real possibility that that
Yeah.
could have real economic impact. And when they interviewed, the interview that I saw with the prime minister, that's what he said. He said, this is
Correct.
about
Yes.
building economic opportunity for the people in the Cook Islands.
Okay. All right. And is this relatively new to it? Because I mean, I haven't heard too many studies or the impacts of seabed mining, what it's really gonna do. I don't know. I haven't heard anything yet since we've done that episode regarding the whole seabed mining. But I don't know. Have you heard anything that
No,
maybe some
not a
of the
lot of
negative impacts?
detail. Yeah, I mean, the challenge is maybe, a lot of people are saying stuff, but kind of like this, they're saying stuff, but no one can stop the Cook Islands from doing what they choose. It's their country, right? It's their
Yeah.
territory. People can call and scream foul, but at the end of the day, if the Cook Islands continue to vote for their Prime Minister Mark Brown, he
Yep.
seems dedicated and committed to making it happen. So
Yep.
really, everyone else can cry foul, complain. At the end of the day, it's going to be up to the Cook Island people
Yep.
on what they want. And so far, what they want is for this guy to continue to do this stuff from what it
Continue.
looks like. So he survives that vote of no confidence. And then we just had another survivor vote of no confidence, was the Samoa PM. Fiame Naomi Mataafa
Mm,
survives no confidence vote.
nice.
So, kind of give the whole summary musty on that whole situation. What was the cause for the drama? There's been a lot of talk about that in Ha'amoa, and what was the driver for this no confidence from your perspective and what you understand.
Yes. So Hamoa was in a precarious situation due to Fiame. the Prime Minister of Samoa at the moment, Fiame, her party kicked her out. Her and I think four or five other individuals that's in her cabinet out of the party. So she was in the minority. So she was kind of in limbo between the two major parties, which is the FAS, the Fa'availeatua Watashi. I think that's kind of like the abbreviation they use. And then HRPP, which is the human rights, which is headed by Tuila Epa. So those are the two parties. And then Fiame is right in the middle, kind of in limbo. But it looks like I didn't see the votes, Tua, who voted for who, if it was the HRPP, most of their party members voted for her to kind of keep her into her place as prime minister, or if it was or was it mix or both? But it looks like
Mm.
it could be a mix of both because, like I said, if she was gonna be voted for no confidence, there's gonna be another expense to do another snap election, and that takes time, and that takes time to do that. So to me personally, I'm glad Fiame was resilient and withstand the no the vote of no confidence. So yeah, things can move on. Oh, and it looks like was defeated
Pretty
34 to
steady, pretty
15.
strong
Yeah,
defense by her.
yeah.
So, and then there's also kind of like a constitutional challenge to
Okay.
whether so right because I think it says to be prime minister you have to be a member of a party, and
Yes.
so they're having some scuffles there. So this was just one of multiple means it looks like that people who are against her are using to try and remove her or at the very least distract her to keep her from accomplishing anything politically.
Mm, yes, and so is that going to go through the courts? I didn't see anything of that because I know that was part of the issue too. That Samoa's constitution states that you have to be in a party to be in
Yeah.
government.
So there was first a lawsuit about removing her from the party or something of that sort, and then the courts said this is a party issue, not a legal issue. You guys need to go figure that out. And then there were rumblings about she can't be PM
Because
because of she's not
she,
affiliated with a party. Then there were talks that she was going to form a party. I didn't hear any updates as to whether that actually materialized. And then all of a sudden, a vote of no confidence was called, and then she had to defend that. So, I mean, this is a lot going on. Tonga went through the same thing, right? Tonga
yeah.
had a vote of no confidence
Well,
twice.
well, well. Only once, right? The second one, it was about to happen, but my man,
Oh, that's
Xiao
true.
Shishiwa,
He
then
threw
he
the
knew
curveball.
he did the easy. He just resigned because
Resign.
he couldn't dealt with not knowing if he was gonna make it or not. So he resigned. At least Afia May and the Cook Islands they stuck it out because I think they knew they had the vote. So you know who knows. But yeah,
Okay.
that's what happened.
So there's that one. And then to end, before we get into the studies, we get into another saga that seems to just keep continuing. Every time we think, like, okay, maybe this is going to blow over, but there was that whole fiasco of the Miss Pacific Islands and, the fraud or the cheating. They held him in the Solomon Islands. They won't let him go back. They finally, the Samoan government writes a letter. He gets released. He goes and does a bunch of podcasts where he's like, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm actually going to sue. Was it Mata Maungaloa? I think
Hmm.
is who he's going to sue her and do all that stuff. And then this pops up, right? Solomon Islands considers fraud charges against Samoan beauty pageant judge, right? And it
That's
says
great.
here, it's crazy,
Yeah.
right? It
Crazy.
says here the Solomon Islands Minister of Home Affairs is considering fraud charges against Samoan beauty pageant judge who is at the center of controversy following the crowning of the 2025 Miss Pacific Islands in Honiara. So they talk about the stop order, and then they
Mhm.
talk about the fraud. I really want to just focus on, which is really unfortunate. So this is Miss Samoa and Miss Tonga, right here.
Yep, the
And
top
really,
two.
it's really unfortunate because they are the ones who suffer, right? The average citizen, the
Yep,
whole thing, like everyone's gonna move on, right?
yep,
Whether Tonga or Samoa wins or whoever wins the pageant, it's not the end of the world. But these young ladies, not just these two, but all the young ladies who participated, they are the
and
ones
prepared. Yeah.
who are losing. Yeah.
Mm,
Um, let's see. They're just kind of rehashing it here.
yeah.
He also acknowledged it was wrong. So there's some drama about posting it on social media. Talks about the Samoan government reaching out with a letter talking about their citizen and getting it released. But we'll see what happens. Maybe is this
Yeah.
just clickbait by this RNZ New Zealand uh, media thing, or is there some possibility that this guy could be charged with something? I mean, they at the very least they held him at the airport.
Yes.
One
I
would
mean, there
think
is.
you might
Yeah.
have something if you're going to hold somebody. But any kind of thoughts on that, Masi?
No, I think I did mention it on the last time, Tua. There needs to be a serious push on having people who don't like, if you're a Samoan or Tongan that have a consistency there, removing yourself and having people who are that really don't have a bone in the fight, with the just to keep it neutral. Even if you did go, let's just say neutral, and it was the right decision, and then maybe there was a mishandling of the paper, but you're giving that outlook on people with you taking away that whatever decision at the beginning, or then taking it over that's going on social media, that it was a different decision. But just to remove all of that, have a Fijian, have a Tuvaluan, with some other, have a Hawaiian there, have a Maori there. The other Polynesian nations that didn't have contestant
Yeah.
competing in the thing, because at the end of the day, then when people start looking into, like I did, that the Miss Pacific pageant is developed and started by the Samoan government for tourism, right? So why
So
would you
there's
not?
a conflict of interest there,
There's
and
some
they've won
even
it the
conflict of
most,
interest.
right?
Yes, see, right, yeah. So I mean, and that's fine. You starting something because that's a good thing. But just to remove a judge of Samoan, and you have a Samoan there, like, come on, it's just a common sense thing that they should have thought of this well before. But
Totally
it's,
avoidable, right?
yes, now they have to react, and hopefully they learn this in the future. So that's just me. I don't know if you had anything, Tua.
Yeah, the so Fiji is not participating, which is kind of unusual. That's a major player in the Pacific. And then I also read that the CEO of tourism is saying Tonga is now considering
Oh,
withdrawing,
okay.
right?
More lost
So
opportunities for the women, because that's a
yes,
that's an opportunity. Yeah.
yep. So once again, kind of disappointing to hear this. Not just that there's potential fraud, but just this puts a taint on the competition, makes things more difficult for the pageant, and I think it's a good thing overall for the Pacific. So it's just kind of a bummer that that's where we are now.
Yeah.
Um, any kind of other just general things, Masi, that you think might be of interest to bring up? Um,
Yeah, there's been a lot of things happening here in New Zealand. There's been a lot of talk on. There's this church called the Destiny Church that kind of um, came
yes,
came up and stopped the LGBT parade, and also the drag queen storytelling for kids in a library. Um, One person has already lost their job just participating in that church. You say protest. That's kind of scary if you're working, and if you in your personal time that you go and protest something that's not that is perceived as you're in the wrong
not a
place.
sponsored event or whatever,
Yes,
right?
not a sponsored bid. You can lose your job. That's pretty crazy. And I hope that gentleman. I think people will know that I think he's Bailey Malala. he can go to court, but sometimes the court judges here in New Zealand are very left. But hopefully he can sort that out, because to me that's not right, man. Because that's kind of scary that you're limiting your freedom of
on
expression,
your
and that's part
personal
of
time.
protesting. Yes, and the other thing is, and I've looked into these things. These events are sponsored by the government, from what I looked. So there are taxpayer money going to these events. They're not private or solely funded by interest group or a lobbyist. This is taxpayer money, which is pretty crazy. That's encouraging these kind of events. Not only
Mm.
that, that story time, that storytelling thing that's happening, that happened at a public library. People are
So in a
saying
public space.
it's in a public space, and I don't know why. I don't know why there was police that were stopping them, because that's a public library for everybody. So that protest had every right to be there, and that's what caused a little scuffle. But it wasn't that bad. But that's a public place. It wasn't like at a private
Mm.
venue. It wasn't at a private venue, a private invitation. It would happen in a public space. So that's free game for everybody,
And then to
and
be funded by
then
taxpayer
funded by
dollars.
taxpayer money. Yes.
Interesting.
So I had no problem with the protests of Destiny Church. They had every right to do that, because, like I said,
Was
that's
it
public
violent or
money.
anything? Was it?
No, no, we and plus the LGBT are not gonna they're not gonna fight back. They only fight back well when they're organized and doing it against somebody speaking that there's two genders, one male and one female. But yeah, that's what's been going on. So it's pretty scary. Disappointed too, because that person that lost their employment is from works supposedly is working for the Polynesian community. They call the Polynesian Media Network, PMN. I listened to them. It's unfortunate they let him go, because this person had on his personal time went to go and join the protest, because that's his church, and he lost his job.
Mm.
So even if you think in the Polynesian, if you take a vote for the Polynesians, they align with the person that lost their job regarding their faith. And I want to take the viewers too to remember the Polynesian players who said they're not going to wear the LGBT in
The
the
jersey.
NRL, the jersey, and they were
Was it
able to
for the Sea Eagle, the
Sea
Manly,
Eagles,
Manly team?
Manly Sea Eagles, because it's not part of it's not part of our faith. We have, we already have we like this Western idea of somebody being a girl or a boy is a very new thing. But the Polynesians, we've already had it, but they have their own
Yeah,
place and own role, and
it
it's a different
existed
sense.
before. Yeah.
Yes. Wait, so we've dealt it a long war, but this whole new Western idea that we've got to join this uh, this LGBT group here, and align to their ideas is wrong. So PMN, but and I did listen to a podcast. PMN, they received their money from the government, so who knows if
Mm.
the government was pulling their
I don't know,
strings to do
100%.
something. So, but the Polynesian Media Network, that what that person did and join the protest for what he protests against is uh is a majority of the Polynesian community. So
Mm.
that's just me, my thing there. I don't know if you had anything to it, but that's kind of like the big thing that's happened in the past couple of weeks here.
No, I just see some parallels with what's been discovered here in the US with Doge, right? A
Mm,
lot of these things, we find out later that some of these activities and NGOs,
mm,
they're
mm.
being funded by taxpayer dollars. And that's a
Taxpayer
challenge
dollars. Yeah.
because some of the things that are being funded with taxpayer dollars are very much against the religious beliefs of certain people. And I'll tell you, if it was the other way around, right?
Mm,
If it was taxpayer dollars to fund religious ideology, the other side would be upset, which is why typically you don't involve taxpayer dollars in those kind of things and you spend it on what matters:
yep.
roads, bridges, right? And those kinds of things, infrastructure. that
Yeah.
benefits everyone, regardless of what you believe and where you stand.
Correct.
So one more comment here. Daniel Mafileo says, Malo Kautama.
Hey, malo,
Daniela,
Daniel.
Malo Abito.
Thank you
Welcome
for
to the
joining us.
live digital kava session.
Yes.
So, with that being said, we're gonna, depending on the time here, we may just go through one of the
Okay.
studies here, but we'll go ahead and share it here real quick. So, this one is by Sean S. Barnes and Terry L. Hunt from the Department of Anthropology of the University of Hawaii Manoa campus. So, the major campus there of University of Hawaii at UH. So, this
Mm,
study is kind of interesting. Uh, they'll describe it, but in summary, they looked at a lot of the oral histories from Ha'amoa,
okay.
right, to try and make conclusions in regards to patterns of the oral history and see
Mm-hmm.
what they could find on what was the relationship of Ha'amoa to other parts of Polynesia.
Okay.
So, if you're good, Mussy,
Let's
if you
go.
could
Let's go.
read that highlighted area all the way down to right there. So it starts with this and then this article. If you could just read through those points.
Okay. All right. What's that topic?
This,
Sorry,
it
our
starts with
logo.
this. Yeah.
This. All right. So this article represents an analysis of previously published Samoan oral traditions in the investigation of Samoa's pre-contact connections to Tonga, Fiji, and other islands of the Pacific. From our study, we draw three conclusions. This is bullet point one. The strongest is that there appears to be a high degree of interaction between Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji in pre contact times. The weakest, this is the second bullet point, the weakest is that Samoa's pre contact relationship with Tonga may have been more continuous and one of distant practicality
Mhm.
involving marriage, politics, and war, while its pre contact relationship with Fiji appears to be more mythic, concerned with ghosts and monsters and with time long ago. Third bullet point. The most striking is that there is little or no evidence for pre contact interaction between Samoa and the islands of Far East Polynesia, such as the Cook, Society, Tuamotu, and Marquesas Islands, especially when compared to the mountain of evidence linking Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji in the pre-contact times. What do you think, Thor?
Yeah. So the first thing that sticks out, that first bullet point, well, that's pretty obvious, right? So they
Yes.
look at those oral histories and they say, oh, Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa have a lot of interactions with each other. What was a little surprising is that second one.
Mm,
That second one is very little to uh oh, so sorry, no, it's that third one. Sorry. The second one is the relationships with Tonga is very practical, very strong. It
yes.
almost seems like
There's no way to separate the two.
there is no way to separate the two,
Yeah.
right? Because everything is so fluid in regards to politics, marriage, war, even the movement of people. When we look at a
Yep.
lot of the oral histories and the stories, Samoa people are coming to Tonga, Tonga people are going to Samoa, and it's going back and forth, intermarrying, right? Sharing of ideas, even games, right?
Yes.
Different games.
Yes.
Like we've said
Hamoa
before,
way, Hamoa
yes,
way, or the Tongatapu way of playing or how to conduct the games. That's funny.
yeah. I mean, and even it feels like more like a village, one village versus another under the same
Yep.
nation, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that's something that was kind of interesting there. But the one that stuck out the most was that third one. Their
Mm,
analysis of the oral history, based looks like a book, right? That
mm-hmm.
was put together of Ha'amoa
Oral,
oral history.
oral history.
Little to no connection to Eastern Polynesia.
Mm. Interesting,
Interesting.
right? Yeah. Because we've had viewers kind of share their ideas of the connections, especially with the Tui Manua, with East Polynesia in some of their songs. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that to me is kind of striking, and and there we're gonna go a little bit more into how or why they came up with those conclusions. So what I've done is I've just highlighted certain portions of this, and we're just gonna skim through and stop through the sections that I've highlighted and just have
Let's go.
commentary on it. But just so that the viewers understand, this is the summary, the overview of what they found.
Yeah.
We will have one more comment. All right. Nelly
Yo, what's up,
Kapitawa
Nelly?
says, my favorite podcast. Thank you, Nelly. We'll
Thank
take
you for
any love that
your
we can
support.
get,
Yeah.
because we don't always get love, huh, Mashi? We don't always get support online.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
for
fine.
sure.
And
That's
that's
fine.
fine. You know,
Yeah.
that's the way life goes.
Yeah.
I'll read this next one. We'll just skim down here. So they just kind of go an overview of
The
the
map.
Western Polynesia. So, oral traditions. It says Vasina defines oral traditions as verbal messages which are reported statements from the past beyond the present generation. The
Hmm.
extent to which oral traditions can be relied upon when making inferences about the past has been a source of enduring controversy, right?
Hmm.
Um, this academic here has argued that Hawaiian oral tradition can often be considered more accurate than written histories. She points to the importance um, Hawaiian chiefs placed on oral history and genealogy, as shown by a specific class of court oral historians responsible for keeping oral histories.
Hmm.
Cachola Abad argues that the courts and historians of different chiefs would have served as a system of checks and balances against the altering of oral traditions in favor of any one chief. In this way, accuracy would be maintained through generations.
Interesting.
This
Interesting. So
comes, yeah.
what is that trying to say to like what is it
So
trying to say
this,
that
what it's trying to say is, number one, just because something's written down doesn't mean it's accurate. And we've
mm,
had this issue, right?
mm-hmm,
There's certain stories that just because a Western missionary happened to be there when it was
and right
said
now. Mm,
and wrote it down, all of a sudden people say that's the gospel. This guy is saying slow down, right? But what he's also saying here is the oral history, not just from one side, but the oral history that's generally accepted by chiefs or people
mm-hmm,
in power is very important. Because
mm,
why? We've talked about this, right? Oral history has its value, but
yeah.
it's also very unpredictable because it's subject to, well, where did you hear that story from? What part of the story are you hearing? Did you interpret it the same way? Right?
Yeah.
But he's saying if you go to the chiefs, they tend to balance each other out, right?
Mm,
Because they'll say, no, that's not correct. The areas of dispute you can say are uncertain, but if there's areas where they all agree, you can say that's pretty much better than a written history by someone who wasn't amongst the chiefs. And this is what we also say on the podcast. Not all oral histories are created equal,
mm,
right? And one of the things we feel that the academics have done is when they first came to Polynesia and Polynesian history, they
yeah.
said all oral history is nonsense, right?
Mm,
Oral history in Tonga with Tafalefa said Polynesians navigated with the stars.
yeah.
They said that is silly.
Mm,
There's no constellation like the North Star in the north. Everything moves in the south. Impossible. Then when the more scientific data comes and it's correct, they're like, oh,
they
we have to
shifted.
believe or they overcorrected and believe every history. That's kind of like what I kind of see there. Masi, any thoughts? Anything that you see differently?
No, that makes sense when it does say when I'm looking here that you have multiple chiefs and that tends to balance out the oral history and especially fixing the gaps because right we've already talked about the weakness of oral history, especially between generation and generation, because you lose a little bit. But when you
Hmm.
have a bunch of chiefs, that will that will balance it out and fill in the gaps, so it doesn't. It will more likely bring out the truth out of that true history or oral history of that particular situation, instead of just having one person saying that that's correct, because each of those high chiefs or influence people in society will add their knowledge to it, and then you would see them debate and discuss which one is the correct history according to their
Exactly.
customs and protocols in their culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you have to remember when someone is telling a story, it doesn't matter. And whether it's the news, the article, or a witness,
Mhm.
just like oral history, you have to be able to accept the fact that why are you telling this version? Are you telling it to achieve a political purpose, a social ranking? And so you have to be able to accept that oral history could be driven by those things. And
Mhm.
therefore, that's why the consensus is more important, right?
Yes.
If everybody agrees to it, there's higher probability that that's close to the truth,
Mhm.
because everybody has their biases and their self interest.
Yeah. Did you want me
All
to
right.
read that next paragraph to her?
Yeah, read the next one.
Okay. However, Olaf Nilsson, 1925, a highly regarded leader in the Samoan independence movement of the 1920s, claimed that Samoan legends and genealogies could be very fluid depending on the waxing or waning social status of the teller or the subject. He argued that as a chief increases in honor and dignity, genealogies and oral traditions relating to that chief were often revised, but such revisions were quite justified by Samoan custom. Hmm, interesting, interesting. So
So,
things what I got out of that is, depending on the chief, if you have status and you tell a story, all the lower chiefs will justify it and saying that that will be fine. Is that what I'm getting? That's what I'm.
yeah, that
That's what I'm
they
getting at.
could make changes,
They could make
right?
changes. Yeah.
Right. Like, for example, for me to become this high chief, I defeated five guys, the original story, five guys in battle, right? Then he becomes the high chief. He can say, hey, guys, I actually defeated 20 guys, right?
Hmm.
And then the
Yeah.
lower chiefs will be like, you know what? We've heard the five
We'll
guy
adjust
story
that.
for forever, but we're okay with making it 20,
Okay.
right? Because
Okay.
that's why he's saying he claimed these legends and oral stories can be very fluid and they can change, because that's his counter to the other position of the other academic who said, as long as they're consensus, you're probably pretty good. But then he gave an exact example of, I know for a fact in Samoan um, culture,
Yeah.
they've made those changes. And just because they all agreed doesn't mean it's true either. It's not 100% for sure. So
Mm.
it gets a little bit, they're kind of countering each other.
Interesting. Want me to continue on, Tua? I can
Yes.
continue on here. So, Nielsen, 1925, also argued that the accuracy of oral traditions was dependent on cultural factors. He offered a very practical example of how oral history can change to suit cultural needs. He told of an old man who wanted to settle a boundary dispute with his neighbor, a very delicate matter in Samoan culture. Instead of provoking a face to face confrontation that would not only be culturally inappropriate but possibly violent, he begins to tell his son invented stories of how, in the days gone by, their family owned the land in question and how it was lost through some weak family link in the past. The father then allows his son to grow up believing a version of altered oral tradition. In this way, the father gave the son a way to make a claim on that land by blaming a past member of his own family through an invented legend, while avoiding placing blame on any living member of the other family. Direct confrontation and interpersonal conflict are thus avoided. Thus, the land claim may be peacefully cemented through altering of oral traditions. Nilsson, 1925, argues that legends and genealogies are altered little by little through time, through situations like this. Indeed, in Samoa today, there is a law, well, there is a lands and titles court that regularly operates outside the realm of Western law and often deals specifically with disputes in oral traditions. Interesting,
Very
right?
interesting.
Mm.
This is
I'm pretty
why. Go ahead,
I'm
Marky.
pretty no. I was gonna say I'm pretty sure there's some our Ha'amoa people use the same idea back in Tonga that came from Upolu and stuff to Tonga Tapu because I think there's some Tongans I know probably do the same thing like this
Yeah,
to avoid confrontation.
it's a
You just tell the
strategy.
next generation, yes, tell the next
It's a
generation.
political
That-
strategy. It's an
Mm,
economic strategy, right? And so these are the type of things that we have to be aware of,
mm,
right? This is another reason why we say, guys, there's a place for oral history, but you know what really strengthens oral history?
ruined.
Archaeological evidence, the
Yes,
ruins.
correct.
You get, and this once again, I'm not trying to be rude, but when you say tu imanua this, tu imanua that, maybe you're true, but you can't come to me and say you must believe the tu imanua, and then I look around for some kind of evidence. Because how do I not know that when the Europeans divided us as a nation, the Polynesian nation, it leaves a vacuum, and then this scenario of how to, it's a strategy to increase your future generations capacity to lay a claim. How do we know
Mm,
that that's not what's being told
yeah.
and invented? How do we not know that? I mean, how do we know that, hey, yeah, the tu'imanu it existed, but we're gonna have to push some certain ideas that don't have any potential truth to it. But you know how we can avoid that?
Archaeological evidence.
Physical evidence,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So could there have been this amazingly powerful tu'imanua? Well, maybe. I don't know. I didn't live for
Yeah.
forever. But what I
Mm,
do know is very hard to believe it when it's hard to find archaeological evidence. And then the archaeological evidence that is found says it's only 400 or 500 years old.
mm,
And that,
mm.
the only evidence we have is it was primarily in Manua, and only at one time in oral history did the Tuimanua have control over all of what we say right now is Ha'amoa.
Correct.
But 99% of the Tuimanua timeline says they just stayed in Manua
Mm,
and really didn't have any influence to the West. So once again,
interesting.
this is, when somebody comes and says, that's why I thought this article was interesting,
Yeah.
right? And you got to remember, this guy is giving an example. He's not telling a story. It sounds like in his research here, he says, I'm telling you of a real life example
Yeah.
of how oral history was invented and for the
Yeah.
purpose it was invented for. And to show you how prevalent it is, there is a lands and titles court, and it only deals with oral tradition disputes.
Yeah.
That's how prevalent it is, that you need a mechanism, a legal mechanism to try to navigate the oral histories because it is so murky and intertwined. So when you show up to the Polynesianized podcast and you say, I have an oral history, I said, great. Everybody has an oral history.
Yes.
For every oral
Yes.
history you bring in one direction, someone can come with an oral history in the opposite direction, and then up, down, in between, all kinds of stuff. Right? That's why the Americans say, show me the money. You can talk a big game, but until you show me the money, we cannot take you seriously. That's how I feel about the ruins and so forth, and why that's such a critical part of helping us navigate the oral history. because we appreciate the oral history. The oral history
Correct.
has a lot of truth, but it's
Yes.
kind of like a maze, and you have to
Yes.
figure out a way to get through it.
Yeah. No, and just to add on to that, too, what oral history is important and it has its value, but do you take it when it's just an oral history? Do you take it instantly? No, we discuss it. You just hold on to it and maybe let time pass by and have another discussion with a different part of people, and then you start refining. Because I feel like oral history is like a clay, tua. Eh?
Mhm.
You kind of fold it, let time, you get more discussion, right? You don't need to do a clay once you have physical evidence and like get oral history, because the oral history brings the physical evidence alive. Because you can't dispute the Ha'amonga, the Langis in Tongatapu, the 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 moving of
Ponuatanu.
soil, Ponuatanu, moving soil to the ocean to increase your land. Like you can't argue with that. And then the oral and that strength, that physical evidence accompanied with your oral history, that's almost like unbreakable. It's like a solid evidence you can take into court, right, to prove. But when you take your own oral history and there's no archaeological, like what you mentioned, to archaeological evidence or ruins to back it up, it's almost like a clay that you have to, over time, you have to keep building, because you can't solely take oral history on its own, kind of on its own, just like that, because one, everyone has their own oral history, and then you gotta decipher which one is the more accurate. And at the same time, I think I did mention this before, oral history matters from what rank you are and what kind of families you come from and where you come from, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, that's, if you're gonna talk about the origin of Tonga, are you gonna get that oral history from Hihifo or Hawaii or somewhere, compared to somebody from, let's just say, from Mua or Hahake? Things like that matter a little bit. You still hear it out. I'm not saying you just reject it. You still hear it out, but like that's part of the that's part of our kind of like our navigating the waves a little bit before we get to open waters, kind of thing.
yeah.
But yeah, that's just me thinking out loud. To
No, 100%. And we have to see, this is where, as Polynesians living in the modern world,
mm,
we still have to be navigators. Except we're not out navigating the ocean. We're trying to navigate our history and the
yeah,
dangerous waters of our history. And if
mm,
you don't try to take the precautions on understanding what oral histories make the most sense, and try to navigate it, you get lost and you come up
mm,
with ideas that don't seem very realistic. And this is why we have this podcast. If you're only going to go talk to the people who believe the same oral history like you do, and only say the oral history you believe in, and you don't challenge some of it,
mm,
then you're going to limit yourself, because there's a high probability that only a small percentage of that oral history that you're listening to could be accurate,
yeah. Yeah, just
right?
have to be mindful and careful. Yeah,
Yeah, and you
exactly.
have to bring the oral histories together, compare, where do they match up, where do they don't, how common is this story, right? Like
Mm,
you just navigate it. How common is this history and this story, and then say, where is the physical evidence that I can solidify,
yeah,
right? This
yeah.
whole thing. So
I
looks
can
like there's a
continue.
couple. Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
real
just
quick. Well,
let me know when to continue
yeah.
reading. To you ready?
So real quick, Wada Bear says first ever Tongan ward in Missouri is crazy. I think that's where Cabo University is.
Oh,
Not sure if
nice.
they have a Ha'amoa ward though.
That's new.
Next,
I didn't know. I didn't know there was a
yeah,
Tongan ward there. Tua, did you have any idea of that?
I
Yeah.
had seen Cabo University Lolo post some activities and stuff that they were doing.
Okay.
I was like, I wasn't sure if it was a ward or a branch, but I knew
Okay.
that there was a community of
Nalo.
Tongans over there, and I know there's a relatively strong community of Ha'amoa in Missouri.
Independence. Yes, I've heard of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So Water Bears also says 7 Tongan steaks in Utah, 2 Tongan steaks in the Bay Area. Um, no Samoan steaks. Do you think
Ooh,
it has to do with anga of both of the culture? What are your
ooh,
thoughts? Man,
interesting.
Water Bears wants to get us controversial right off the
All
bat.
right.
What are your
No,
thoughts,
no, that
Basil?
is um that is interesting. Because I know there were talks of in Utah to have a Samoan state because there were many Samoan wards within the Tongan states. Right now, there's a Samoan president, Shifonua. He's a Samoan from American Samoa. I know his family. When I lived in Samoa, he's the president of a Tongan state, and he has counselors of Tonga and Samoan. So, but it's still under the Tongan state, and I think Water Bears brings a good point. Why is it only Tongan steaks? Because we're the very small one.
In theory, the
We're the very
smallest.
smallest. There's less of us overseas because we know we've never colonized. So every time we go overseas, it's very difficult for us to migrate out compared to the other Polynesian neighbors because most of them are colonized. So it's much easier for them to move to those bigger countries. But I think it has to do it to me. It has to do with the church leadership trusting the Tongan way of doing things, in my opinion. And when I say doing things in a way of loyal followers of the faith, I think that has a big deal to it. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking because there's a lot more Ha'amoas than Tongans in overseas, and it's not
Yeah.
it's not
And
close.
been there longer,
Been
right?
there longer,
It was a lot
right?
harder for the Tongans to migrate overseas because Tonga was independent. One of the
Yes.
benefits, there are pros and cons to being colonized and pros and cons to not being colonized. The pro of being colonized is you get to access lands and opportunities of your colonizer before an independent
Mm,
nation does. So
mm,
Tonga was independent. There was much less opportunity for Tongans to go overseas than it was for
yes.
Kauhamo,
Yeah.
right? So, and I agree 100%. I mean, when you look at the simple math, and maybe let's read one more comment, a follow up comment
Okay.
by Water Bears before I dig into it. It says, kind of says, the house system, everyone has a part, and one speaker versus the Matai system, communal system, too many chiefs, and seeking, I don't know what, and
Southern
soughting
Africa.
after a higher ship. Not clear on
Mm,
that, but I kind of get the general idea there, Water Bears. And I think there are certain advantages of that, right? When you have when you're in a when you do something for so long, I believe it gets into your DNA,
mm.
right?
Yeah. For the next
And
generation. Yeah.
yes, and in Tonga Tapu, kind of pretty, or in Tonga, like Water Bear says, consolidated power, having a clear and direct leader, right? And having that consistency over generations where you talk to people who have different ideas. Like Xiao Xi Layu, he talks about the fatongia, right?
Yes.
This is a family tradition and we've stuck to it and this is what we do. I believe that type of consistency over many generations, it leads to genetic changes or social behaviors that endure. And I think that has a big part. In the church, my understanding is a ward is determined not by how many people.
Mm,
You could have 600 people,
correct.
but if you don't hit the right ratio that the church has determined is sufficient to maintain a healthy ward, and what's that ratio? Full Melchizedek priesthood holders who are full tithe payers.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
primary driver. You meet that ratio, you will have a ward,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I think there are certain benefits of, I mean, have you seen Tongan cultural events compared to others? I mean, it's on a scale. it's on a scale. That's the way I'm going to say it because I don't want to come across the wrong way. But it's on a different scale, right? When you have
Mm,
thousands of pigs, when you have thousands of food baskets, I
yeah,
mean, go to Tonga if you ever have a chance to visit Tonga. Go to Tonga between December and January and go to some of these conferences that are going on
yeah,
and just look at how much money is being spent on feasts, on activities and stuff. I mean, I remember growing up in Tonga during that time, there's no eggs on the island, there's no mayonnaise on the island because it's all been bought up and used for all the kaipola and the wikelotu and all those things, right?
mm,
And it's just mind-boggling that like you said, like Waterbury is saying, it's just I think it's in the DNA. Hopefully we keep it, but it's that dedication, that willingness, que fua
sacrifice,
or the
man. Yep.
kaveinga, that's nothing new. That's nothing new. And at the scale, and that translates really well to the LDS requirements for awards.
Yes. No, and just to add on to it, like you said, the sacrifice of paying tithing and being um, worthy priesthood holder, like you said, that's the biggest critical um, indicator if you're going to create a ward and a stake. Tongans tend to do that because culturally, you see how they do things. It's no, I mean, like I said, the closest is Samoa because, like I said, Samoans, when I served my mission there, they fed me in the morning and dinner, just like the Tongan missionaries would always get the same thing too. But I've gone to some of their cultural events. It's a big deal, but like Tonga's just on another scale with funerals and even bestowing titles.
Mhm.
It's not a Mickey Mouse thing, like you said to and in order to put all of that, because we're not all wealthy, but when the clan pulls together to make it happen. Everyone brings 300 there. This one, you bring 200 here. You bring 50 baskets there. You put it all together. And all of that is you need to work in coordination and work um, in a mass group and have one single people, or you can call it the Ho'egi and some of his advisors and stuff that work under him. They're all kind of managing and all working in a unison um, direction to achieve an objective. So, and Tongan's been doing that for a long time, very long time.
Thousands of
So
years. Yeah.
thousands, thousands of years. So it's just, I think that's a big reason why we've kind of prevent, right? You need to work together as a people, having more centralized authority to avoid colonization. So it's just why when Tongans do something, we don't do it small. Sometimes it's difficult because, right? Some people say you shouldn't do things big there and there because you might eat noodles for the rest of the month. But to me, you do it if that's what you want to do, and if it means to eat noodles, hey, at least you eat noodles. You don't just drink
Noodles it
water, have
is.
nothing. Yes, and that's
You
what
know?
Tongan families go through, and
Yeah.
yeah, love. It's hard to explain it when when you just see it and you just, man, it's really good. But to
You,
understand when people, the amount of energy and sacrifice and commitment, man, it's pretty
you
crazy.
know the perfect example for this, Masi?
Yeah,
The Red Sea, the Rugby
exactly.
League World Cup in New Zealand.
Yeah.
The smallest nation, maybe the Cook Islands. I think the Cook Islands played in the they played in the World Cup, maybe, but
Mm.
Tonga was the smallest nation, and who had the biggest impact on a international tournament?
Matematon, yeah.
Matematong. Not just
Mm.
the players. You look at the players. Look at the movement that the Matematonga players with Jason Taumalolo and Fifita started, and then all the other players, because they all sacrificed in their prime.
Yeah.
This is the type of thing we're talking about. Why did it take Tonga to do that? We're the
Yeah.
smallest in size, in volume of people. If you put up the value of the economies, whatever you want to say,
Mm.
it doesn't make sense. And then
Hmm.
you look at the stadiums, the smallest amount of people were the most amount of people in the stadium,
Mm.
right? I mean,
Mm.
this is, and then that's the same impact it has on the church. It has, I
Yeah.
mean, there's just got to be a pattern, and yeah.
No, no, and Tua, and I think, see, right, and this is kind of part of the pros of not being right, being independent since your ancestors stepped foot in your land of inheritance in the kingdom of Tonga. Because why did it take Tonga? Because people still feel culturally tied. A lot of those players are born overseas, New Zealand
Mhm.
and Australia.
Some of
Fifita
them
and
never been to
Taumalolo.
Tonga.
Some of them never
Yeah.
been to Tonga, but and you could argue you can argue why did it take the Tongans and the Hot just started doing it? Hot Moors migration's been happening overseas much longer,
Hmm.
but how
Hmm.
come they didn't feel the pull to play for Samoa before the Tongans did it, right? But it's just you can argue the cultural ties is a lot, and the cultural ties is only stronger, in my opinion, because its people sacrifice and work and make it important. I'm always amazed to her. We're the only Polynesian nation at the moment that a Tongan lady can have a store or sell Tongan koloas at their house and make a profit and make a money because that why is a Tongan mat or a ngatu valuable? Because you still have a lot of people in the Tongan community practice it, and then people will buy it while they give you the money to do whatever you have, and they'll take and hold on your koloa until you pay them back, because if you don't, they're gonna keep it and then they'll use it for their own
That's the
cultural uh,
collateral. Yeah.
collateral, right? So that's what I'm saying. I don't know any Ha'amoas, Cook Islands,
You go give
Tahitian.
a mat. Yeah.
Up, give a mat because somebody's willing to pay that much to hold it for you. It's a business. It's a business transaction. If you can't get it back, they're gonna pay you thousands of dollars so they can hold your mat. If you can't pay that $1,000 back in 3 months, they're gonna keep it. Like they're all over Auckland. I see them all the time. My wife and I, my wife needed a kie. I told we she knew a Tongan store that was had it up in Papa Toi Toi. She went and grabbed a kie that nobody was able to purchase back, but it's the stores now. And then I think she got it for like $200, 200, and it's not cheap stuff, man.
No.
So that's what I'm saying. I don't. It's the cultural stuff, man. Like it's only important because the people make it important, and it's through their commitment to practice cultural protocols and cultural commitment to their responsibility. But
Yeah. And I do want to just reiterate as we get back in here, that could have been one of the pros of not being colonized, like you said. The negative was Tongans didn't have access to resources and markets that were available to those who were colonized because we remained independent.
mm,
Um, but what's the pro? The pro is cohesiveness of the people and the culture,
yeah,
right? So that's interesting. You want to read the in the
yeah.
edition?
All right. So, in addition to investigating the accuracy of oral traditions, one must also practice what Tosh 2000 called internal criticism. This is the investigation of the authenticity of oral traditions. As distinct from accuracy, the authenticity of oral traditions has more to do with errors and biases in transcription and translation. In this article, we deal primarily with Samoan legends that have been, for the most part, recorded in the late 19th century and missionaries and outside government officials. To accept these writings as authentic Samoan oral traditions is to imply that those who recorded them were motivated by nothing other than an interest in history. Clearly, this was not the case, as no less an authority than Tuiatua Tupua Tamasese, the patriarch of one of the royal families of Samoa and a former prime minister, pointed out. Tupua Tupua Tamasese argued that the early recorders of many of these legends may have had the best of intentions, but were surely influenced by outside factors. Missionaries from the London Missionary Society (LMS) were the first to record the Fa'alupenga, honorific greetings of each village. These honorific greetings are important in Samoan custom as they may spell out the rankings of major Matai chiefly titles in a village. Members of the LMS were hardly unbiased and objective observers. From the time its first missionaries arrived, the LMS had been firmly in the camp of the chief Marietoa. Hence, Tupua Tamasese contended that the honorific greetings recorded by the LMS show a marked bias toward the Marietoa line.
So once again,
Hmm.
does that mean we just throw out every oral history that was recorded by the missionaries? No, but you at least have to accept that there is a high influence or high probability of bias built into it, right?
Hmm.
And there's disputing of that stuff. Anything else, or
And
you want me to read here, Masi?
no, I can keep going. I can keep going. I was just gonna
Oh,
add on to it because the Marietoa line, I think that's the one that actually allowed the LMS to kind of come and set up and kind of prosper in Samoa. So there's that. It's the same
that
kind of
connection.
argument. It's almost the same argument when you have the Catholics history and version of stories
Hmm.
with the Tuitonga and the Wesleyan missionaries with their stories of the
To go the
Tui
first.
Karupolu, yes,
Yeah,
line. So it's the same kind of thing, right? It's the same kind of thing with the Maria Toa line with the LMS. So I just thought
yeah,
that.
and to kind of point that out, I mean that exists in the Tongan history as well, like you were saying. And you notice we had this comments with one of the followers slash viewers on oral history. See how strong a oral history that even something that's recorded correctly can be interpreted incorrectly. A
Mm,
lot of people say the Tuikanu Kupolu or Tau Tupo the first defeated the Tuitonga Laufiritonga.
yeah.
Okay. There's dispute on that battle, right? In Velata on who won. Some of the Catholics say Laufiritonga won. The Methodists say Tupo the first one. But here's the funny thing. Everyone seems to accept that Tuitonga lost to the Tuikanukupolu, and that's why the Tuikanukupolu had a military takeover because the Tuikanukupolu beat the Tuitonga.
Yeah.
And
In
yet the
Velata. That's
history
like the story.
clearly
Yeah.
says Laufiritonga was not the Tuitonga at that time.
Mm,
These were two young guns going at it at each other. And then a year later, a year after, a year or so after the Velata battle, Laufiritonga goes to become the Tuitonga, and guess what happens? There's never a battle between them two.
mm,
But everybody
yeah.
will go around saying, oh, the Tuikanukupolu beat the Tuitonga. No, Tupo the first, assuming that that's true, if he did win that battle, he defeated a young man who was the heir, a potential heir to the Tuitonga, but he was not the Tuitonga.
Mm.
But
It
everybody
was like,
assumes the other way. Oh, he defeated the Tuitonga. No, he defeated a potential heir and not the
yeah.
Tuitonga itself. Because once Laufiritonga becomes the Tuitonga, the whole situation changes. But
Yeah.
wanted to bring that up.
No, very good. Very good. Did you want me to continue right here too? The
Yeah,
German
if you're
ethographer?
feeling good, if you're feeling good
Yeah,
with the read, go
feel
ahead.
good. The German ethographer or geographer and medical doctor, was it August? What's that?
Augustine,
August Augustine Gra- Gramier wrote a massive two-volume. Uh, was it treatise? Tua? How would you say that?
treatise. Yeah.
Treaty? No, treatise on all things Samoan in 1901 that has become the foundation for most work on Samoan ethnography. However, Tupua Tamasese, 1994, pointed out that Khmer Karmer was in the service of the German government, which controlled Samoa at the time and vigorously supported the High Chief Mataafa, a rival of Marietoa. Tupua Tamasese, 1994, argued that the influence of outside forces becomes evident in many of the genealogies and legends recorded by Khmer and the missionaries. He claims that the LMS missionaries altered what they recorded to favor the Marietoa line, while Cramer did the same to favor the Mataafa line. Later writers, including the present authors, repeat the stories these early writers recorded. This repetition serves to make the stories appear to be some sort of unbiased standard when in reality they may be a reflection of the internal political machinations. What do you, yeah, Tua? Was that
Yeah, I would
machination?
say machinations.
Machinations of both the outsiders that originally recorded them and the indigenous informants that offered them.
So
Hmm.
once again,
Now we're picking
this
sides over here.
yes, picking sides, and just because our oral history is repeated, you know what they say? Repeat the lie until everyone believes it. This is a trick that the mainstream media does, right?
That's what they tried to
If
do to Donald Trump. He's
yeah,
indicted. He's a
if
criminal.
everybody says it, then people say, "Oh, everyone is saying it, it must be true." That's not always the case. There's
Hmm.
biases behind it. Once again, when you hear a certain oral history that could have been created, and you hear it, we don't blame you. It's natural human tendency to, I've heard it, I do the same thing all the time. When I see a certain story in my feed a lot, I'm like, oh, there's a possibility this is true, right? When in
Hmm.
reality, it could be just people
Yeah.
repeating a false story. So
Hmm.
that is also true of oral history. Go ahead, Mas.
These issues of accuracy and authenticity are very real concerns when using oral traditions to investigate history. Indeed, any perusal of the literature on Samoan oral traditions presents the reader with multiple versions of any one story. However, our hope is that the evidence presented here reflects a larger historical pattern. We analyzed over 200 published legends, multiple genealogies, and personal interviews. The evidence from Samoan oral traditions presented here appears to be clear both in the strength of Samoa's connection to Tonga and Fiji and the weakness of its connection to East Polynesia. It is our second conclusion: practical connections to Tonga versus mythical connections to Fiji that makes the kind of inferential leap of faith that is most susceptible to the nuance altering of oral traditions described above. Hmm.
So, what I take from that is if you take a whole volume of oral history and you try to see the overall patterns, they feel comfortable saying that could be a better indicator than trying sometimes to get into the weeds of each oral history because some of them contradict each other. That's the way I kind
Hmm.
of read that. Did anything stick out to you specifically, Masi?
Uh, nope, nope. Just their connections to East Polynesia, because like I said, we've had some viewers kind of mention that More having a stronger connection to Eastern Polynesia, referencing them as the origin, kind of where everybody kind of spread. But yeah, that's just
Yeah.
interesting, you know.
Well, see, that's the thing. Who started that idea,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It could have started repeated so many times, but then when you
It was
go to the actual documented, that
hmm,
doesn't seem to have
any
that
connection to
reality,
relation. Yeah.
right? So that's where things get interesting. Once again,
Hmm,
this is why ruins and archaeological evidence matter, right?
correct.
Because you can easily very valuable to have oral history, but it can also be so fluid that you get lost in
Yeah.
it. These are they kind of go over some creation legends. It talks about the roles of Tonga and Fiji pronounced. I'm just trying to see if there's anything here.
Kind of the stories.
Yeah, we'll just read through it here since I
Okay.
highlighted it. I'll read
I
it.
can.
The
Okay.
roles, I'll read it. I'll read it real quick. The roles of Tonga and Fiji are pronounced in Samoan oral traditions, and these connections go back to the very beginning. Fraser records numerous Samoan creation stories. Most of these tell of the creation of Fiji and Tonga at the same time as Samoa's creation. These stories may include such pan Pacific themes as fishing up Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa with a magical fishhook, or a more unique idea of creation of islands by appeals to the gods Tangaloa. But most tell of a tale of creation that involved three island groups and not just one. Thus, Samoa's oral traditions creation are intertwined with those both of Tonga and Fiji. Once again,
Okay.
this kind of further goes through the idea of Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa, you know, being settled relatively close to each other and being one nation, not
Yeah.
not these independent cultures that came about independently, heavily
Correct.
intertwined and connected even through creation accounts.
Yeah.
Any comments on that, Masi?
No, that's interesting with the Fiji one because Fiji history is a little bit more mysterious, in my opinion. I no question with Samoa, Tonga, like about the same time, all the kind of the same people, like especially the I would say, you know, Samoa archipelago with the Tonga one, like it's almost like it was intertwined. But Fiji has an interesting thing because I would like to see like when did that really happen? If the Polynesians were there first, or was it the we call it the black dark skinned people, the smaller build people? Were they kind
Hmm.
of there, just kind of from the things I've kind of learned is they were more of not civilized. They were just kind of living off the bush kind of thing. And it was more of the Polynesians bringing civilization and they kind of intertwined and mingle through there. But I don't know. I've just kind of, Fiji's one's a little interesting. I would like to, further
Explore
know.
that more.
Yeah, explore that.
Yeah. You want to read this one, Masi?
Yep. Table 1 above shows that the connections with Tonga and Fiji in Samoan oral traditions appear to be strong. It is clear that pre-contact Samoans were aware of the existence of both Tonga and Fiji. However, there also appear to be some distinct differences in the nature of Samoa's relationship to each. In looking at the Samoan legends in the appendix, some thematic differences stand out. Legends that involve Tongan interactions tend to focus more on practical matters such as political machinations, marriages, and war, while legends that involve Fiji usually deal with more mythical themes such as monsters and the supernatural. Also, it is notable that Fijian interaction occurred mostly in the distant past, the foundation of a village in a time long ago. Indeed, Turner, 1984, in his survey of legends involving the founding the founding of villages, found that 18 out of 39, 46% of these legends involve Fiji, while only 6 out of 39, 15% involve Tonga. Interesting. What do you think, Tua?
Mm. Yeah, I mean it's like the further back it goes and the more sketchier it becomes, they tie it to Fiji.
Is it
And
because of the mix, the udi udi over there mixed with the Polynesian? I don't know. I just because even me, it could be maybe a mystic. I don't know. I'm just thinking. Why do you think it's
they're
such
they're,
a?
they're gonna give an interesting analysis on that later on.
Okay, okay.
And it's actually really interesting. And it also ties a little bit to the Cook Islands. Because it's the Cook Islands that also have the name Rarotonga.
Lalo Tonga. Yes.
Eh? And I
Yeah.
just had an interesting idea when I was reading through this article, um, on why possibly the Cook Islands were called Rarotonga.
Okay.
Kind of
Interesting.
interesting. Yeah, go ahead
Okay.
and read this. So this is Samoa and East Polynesia.
Awesome. So the contrast between West and East Polynesia in Samoan oral traditions is significant. There is strikingly little mention of the distinct archipelagos of East Polynesia in any of the sources of Samoan oral history used in this study, particularly in comparison to the mountain of oral traditions that connect Samoa with Tonga and Fiji. Batsi Carmer, 1994. Okay, for some possible connections from Manua to the east. Okay, Samoan oral traditions are effectively silent on any connections to East Polynesia. This lack of connection is evident in both published Samoan oral traditions and interviews conducted with Samoan recognized as knowledgeable in oral traditions. However, it must be noted that this study is by no means exhaustive. It would be useful to consult the oral traditions of Manua, the most easterly Samoan island group, to look for links to the east. However, there are many more oral traditions published from the more western islands of Samoa than from Manua. It should also be noted that we limit our analysis to mostly published material. Yet there are far more Samoan oral traditions kept only in living memory than published in any book or journal. Interesting. Kind of what we kind of talked about with the connections of Manua to East Polynesia, Tua.
Yes. There's an interesting comment here that's kind of related to this, coming here from Facebook. This is Legrand Maretti. He says, let me just change the let's change the view here. It says the Westerners saying Samoa had little relations to East Polynesia goes against what you guys say when you said we were all one nation, all traveling to and from one another from trading and wars. If what the Westerners say were true, would would have been just before Europeans came into contact with our people. So, Legrand, my thoughts on this, and then I'll have Masi comment on it as well, is this: all roads lead to Tongatapu, right? Our position to explain this is Samoa was not the center of the empire, right? Just like when you're in the Roman Empire, there were certain pockets around Rome that had some regional
Hmm.
roads to it or connection. But even then, all of these went to Rome. And when you go to Rome, you would find artifacts and things from all around the Roman Empire. And not every part of the Roman Empire was fluid and had direct relations to Rome. So that's kind of the thought process there. So in theory, the Tuitonga, whose primary residence was on Tongatapu. And, we won't have time today just looking at the time, but there are archaeological studies that show stone products in Samoa, 99.9% from
Yeah.
within Ha'amoa.
Mm.
You go to Tonga, 60% of the stone axes that they studied at the Tongan settlement, 60% were from East Polynesia, Fiji, Ha'amoa, and other parts of Polynesia. So that is kind of my initial response to that. Legrand, we were one nation, but not all parts of the nation or the cities, like the villages, did not all have the same traffic as the capital did. Any thoughts
Mm.
on that, Masi?
No, and just to add on, I think another big significance to it because right now they're just focusing on Upolu and Savai, right, and the islands surrounding those two major islands. Um, to my understanding, and it's a good question here by Legrand Maretti. The only Polynesian people that's probably traveled the most were the Tongans. They traveled in the traditional way up to the 1800s and even up to the even early 1900s. They were still traveling to different parts of Samoa, up to Fiji, right? Up to all the way to Fiji, because that knowledge of navigating was a strong point of Tonga, and that's the reason why in our place in Mua in Talasiu, where we have strong connections and even Eastern Polynesian dancing and different reference to Eastern Polynesia that's still maintained in Tongatapu, and also
Mm-hmm.
stories of Hawaii with Nua coming to marry um, the
The Tuitonga.
Tuitonga during that time. I think it's Momo. So we have that connection. That's the story. That's in Tonga. The our connections to Fiji and Samoa, obviously, and like I mentioned, Eastern Polynesia. That's the Polynesian nation, and they were still in those days still migrating. Why is that still relevant in Tonga? Is because the Inasi played a big deal. The Inasi is
Hmm.
where they came and gave their gave their respect and offerings to the Tuitonga and the Polo Polo, which was the the ancient religion, Polynesian religion. So those stories are still relevant, and that's why there's probably strong connections to the other Polynesian islands in Tongatapu compared to Ha'amoa, which they're still trying to figure out, and they're trying to reference to Manua, which we've kind of talked about earlier to their connections to Eastern Polynesia. That's just me, Tua, on that.
No, 100%.
Good question, though.
Appreciate the question there, Legrand. Thank you. So, in this portion here, it talks about one potential connection to East Polynesia, which is one oral history about the Cook Islands. And then it
Mm,
says here, perhaps the Cook Islands served an intermediary role between East and West in the same way, but to a lesser extent than Tonga may have served an intermediary role in West Polynesia, as we shall see. Now, what this made me think of, Masi, is remember the Tuitonga at the height of the Polynesian Empire, he recognized the burden it was for every corner of the empire to come to Tongatapu in twice a year,
yeah.
right? For the Inasi to kind of pay their tax, it's kind of viewed as the best way I see it is like a tax, right?
Mm,
And then the Polo Polo was a tithing once a year and a tax once a year. The Tuitonga established certain areas where they could bring the Polo Polo once a year and
yeah.
didn't have to come to Tongatapu. And they introduce an idea here that maybe the Cook Islands or Rarotonga was an intermediary, right? Like certain
Yeah.
cities where flow of materials or whatever comes to that city before it gets taken to the capital,
Mm,
right? And it made me think, what are the possibilities or the chances that Lalotonga is called Lalotonga because it was an intermediary point
yeah.
for the tributes to say, bring the tributes to Rarotonga because that's where it will be collected on behalf of the Tuitonga before it's shipped
To
to
Tongatapu.
Tonga,
Mm,
right? Or something of that sort. So I thought
mm.
that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah.
Here's a question here from Tees. What do you guys think of the similarities between the Mayan headdress and the one worn by the Tongan chiefs? Have you seen those,
Ooh.
Masi?
I think we did talk about it a little bit,
One
Tua.
time, right? Like the
Yes.
Tuitonga where it has like that flat flaring
Yes.
out. So
Yes.
seems very similar. And the Mayans loved red feathers.
What?
Polynesians love red feathers. And it's a
Yes.
when I say love, it's almost like a religious deal. There is a dedication and a significance of
Of
red
status.
feathers.
Yes,
Yeah,
of
for
being a very
status.
status. No, I like I'm a believer of the origin coming from the Americas, where a lot of their customs and technology, even the way we build our ruins and our um, you know agriculture is from the Americas. So I'm not surprised, Tease, that we took that headdress and adopted it into the Tuitonga, because that's very interesting too. I noticed that the only person that had a headdress was a Tuitonga. I didn't see Tui Polu or Tui Hatagalawa have any headdress. So that was very specific for a headdress for the Tuitonga. That's just my understanding. I don't know if you saw anything like that. And
No, that's the way I view it too. I don't know of any sketches. Maybe there are, but the only ones I've seen is the Tuitonga
the Tuitonga.
wearing
But yeah,
it.
that's my thoughts there, Tease. Uh, Strong possibility it's a reference to Waihi, the Americas of the the people that we kind of came from, or where we kind of originated from to Polynesia. But I don't know, Tua, what's your thoughts
No,
on that?
no, I'm of the same
Yeah.
thinking there. Well, go ahead here. I'll read this next section, Mussy. It says
Okay.
in Polynesia, marriage partners of rank often sought outside of one's own borders. A number of cultural reasons have been given for this practice. There was often, especially in Tonga, I think it's
Mm,
the specific words is when you hear, oh yeah, they were marrying outside of the their islands, but then says especially in Tonga, meaning that's where the
it was no.
practice was most prevalent.
Yeah.
An idea that the body of a high chief is taboo, this would preclude Tongans from touching the body of the Tuitonga. However, this taboo was not applicable to non Tongans. For example, in former times, only a Samoan or Fijian could cut
Mm-hmm.
the hair of the Tuitonga, as no Tongan was allowed to touch the head of the king. This made the importation of foreign workers, slaves, and spouses advantageous, a niche that early Europeans in Tonga came quickly to fill,
Yep.
right? So that's where a
Yep.
lot of these Europeans found a way for them to fit into the culture is,
Make
and this
themselves
is,
useful.
yes, and this is very evident when you look at William Mariner's story. This is why Finau was very
Mm,
comfortable with William Mariner doesn't have to follow our practices because he's not Tongan,
yeah.
right? Not the same expectations.
Yes. Want me to
And
read that next paragraph to her, or
yes, yeah,
okay? Another factor at work in foreign spouse selection is the idea held in Tonga and to a lesser extent in Samoa that sisters are of inherent higher rank than are their brothers. In this logic, the sister of the Tuitonga would theoretically outrank him. However, this ranking is more about social prestige and difference than political authority and power. A problem might arise, however, if the sister of the Tuitonga married a high ranking, politically powerful Tongan man. Such a union might produce offspring possessing both more prestige and more political power than the actual paramount. In the cultural logic, such an imbalance could lead to war. In order to avoid this, high ranking Tongan Samoans Fijians have traditionally exchanged spouses. If the sister of the Tuitonga married a high ranking Samoan, their offspring would not be in direct competition with either the Tongan or Samoan paramount lines for power and prestige solely by nature of their birth. Although such offspring may choose to seek power and prestige later on, this would be considered a safe marriage politically. Mm-hmm.
correct. So
Yep.
we've heard the idea expressed that the Tuitonga and so forth married to Ha'amoa so often because that's how the Tuitonga got his royal blood because it comes from there.
Yeah.
It is documented that that is not the reason. We've expressed it from the oral
Yeah.
history, right? But these people are saying no, there's been documented studies done on it that that was the primary driver behind it. It was to make sure that no one else on Tongatapu consolidated power above the Tuitonga or even the appearance of it,
Mm,
right? And there are other people who say, oh, only the Ha'amoa people were ranked enough or high enough rank to touch the Tuitonga's body. Well, no, that's not. It's
yeah.
because they didn't want people in Tonga getting comfortable with the
Yes.
idea. Because if they're able to have access to the Tuitonga's body, it in a way elevates them. And they don't
Yes.
want that done. They want a
Yes.
foreigner to do that because a foreigner is less of a risk. A foreigner is not going to consolidate power in Tongatapu. So it's a much safer thing, just like the marriages. And once again, it's actually the other way around. The outer islands got their prestige
Being
from
closer to.
marrying to
Yeah.
the family of the Tuitonga. And that's
Yeah.
what drove that. Any thoughts or comments on that?
No, I was just saying too when you say like when we say like foreigner, we probably mean a distant relatives, right? Very distant, the why because I'm just
Yes,
thinking like in Tongatapu, we're just saying foreigner because we don't want somebody within the sphere of the
Tongatapu area.
Tongatapu
Yeah.
area. Let's the furthest island from the empire is the best person because one, I you elevate them and they are willing to serve you, and you still maintain your prestige among the people that you live by on a daily basis, kind of thing, because that's how you kind of maintain your, you know, your prestigeness, kind of thing. That's what I'm
Yes.
thinking to it with that, because the
No,
further you are in the empire, the better,
less
more
risk.
likely
Yeah.
you're gonna be picked to come and serve the tuitonga of that time.
Yeah. Let me see here. The comments are starting to pick up. Let's not
Okay.
get too far from it. Let me scroll down. Here's the example of Salamasina, right?
Mm, yeah,
Where it
very
was
well known
her.
story.
Yes. Very well known story there. Let's come through some of the questions here. Let's change our format. Let's go with this one. It says to go off the name Rarotonga Island, the previous names was Tumu Teva Varavo, Pukaikai o Taringa, and the unofficial name Havaiki only said when referring to the land of an ancestor. Interesting.
Mm,
Rarotonga in our oral history comes from Karika Alia. When asked by Tahitian Tangia of the directions to Tumu Tevararvaro, when the Manua and Tahitian met out at sea, Karika pretty much told him Rarotonga down or leeward south. Okay, so that's some of
interesting.
the oral history behind that. Appreciate that, Legrand, Malo.
Yep. Thank you.
Want to read this one, Masi?
Yes. Why do you think this is from Tees. Why do you think this information that seems so plain to see, especially with the historical dates of Tongan artifacts being dated oldest in Polynesia, not get pushed at all across the Pacific? What do you
What are your
think,
thoughts,
Tua?
Masi? Okay,
Uh,
I'll take a
yeah.
shot at this. For me, it's primarily because academia and the West don't want to accept that Polynesia was a nation of connected
Mm,
people, of sophisticated capabilities. They like the narrative of, oh, they're just a bunch of savages. You know what I mean? Oh, they
mm.
were able, yeah, they could navigate, but did they have the
Civilized
political and
civilization. I
yes,
don't. Yes.
did they have the sophistication of government, social structure, and stability? Right? Because what do they like to call us? And yes, we're warriors. Granted, we have
Yes.
physical attributes, but you don't have a stable civilization when all you have is warriors.
Mm,
Warriors are needed when law and order is no longer
an option.
successful,
Yeah.
right? But we also know that there's a lot of documentation that throughout Polynesia, there wasn't consistent large scale war, and that there
Yeah.
was stability, that there was structure, and that allows the population to flourish, but that only exists if there's political, social, legal, religious, and scientific knowledge to facilitate that stability. Um,
Mm,
and I think the academics um, don't like that and they don't want to. And then you add to it the fact that all of us have accepted the colonization lines that have been drawn, that each island was an independent nation that
mm.
justified Europe in their, it was okay for us to cut this up because it's not like we went into a country and broke it
Yeah.
apart. These were all just savages separated from each other. We can
Yeah.
just create nations for them because it didn't exist. That's my
Mm.
initial response to that.
You don't know. My thoughts, T's. It is interesting. I mean, this is the reason why we started this platform to brought this idea is to discuss, because we think it's plainly out there and enough evidence to suggest that Polynesia was a nation. The center being Tongatapu, run by the Tuitonga, and then funneled to the current Tuikangpolu with Tupo being the history of Polynesia. I don't know why it's taking so long. It does remind me of the days in the 90s and early 2000s when Polynesians were not navigators, and then finally everyone says how we're great navigators now, and that's a common thread right now in academia. But hopefully, more conversation starts to happen that recognizes that we were a sophisticated Polynesian civilization. Remember, we in order to develop these sophisticated ideas, especially ruined buildings and land moving,
Hmm.
in order to develop these ideas, you must have hundreds of years of peace in order to do this kind of work, and not instability, which is wars and stuff, right? Because that seems to be the common theme with our very good Polynesian players in contact sports, that saying that we're just natural warriors and stuff, and that is true. But there's a lot of gaps that were not being bestowed upon, that we were thinkers, sophisticated people, and also we were technology creators, innovators in that
Yeah.
time, because not many civilizations can move land and expand land to the ocean.
Hmm.
So just I don't know why it's slow, but this is the reason why Tuak brought this uh, platform, Polynesian Ice Podcast, so that we can just start discussing and just project our ideas out there. So yeah.
No. Here's a couple comments here. How do you know me? Says I'm full Samoan and my DNA says I'm 60% Samoan, 37% Tongan, 3% Chinese. That's the whole point there. How do you know me? That's what we're saying. Like in the Polynesian Empire, there was no unique people that were called Samoan and Tongan. We were all just one people, one nation,
Yeah.
right? And it's more to think of it, instead of thinking of us as nations, think of us as like villages or islands. The islands are villages
Yes.
within
Yes.
the context that we're used to. we would
Yes.
we would say, oh, Ha'amoa is like, oh, that's just one of the villages in the empire. In because
Yes.
this is in every village. I'm sure it is. Masi, maybe Masi can confirm because you were in Samoa or Ha'amoa for a longer time, living there. But even with certain ways things are done, this village has their own set of rules on how to do a certain.
Yeah.
Same thing in Tonga. One village likes, we all have certain practices that we say, oh yeah, we kind of do the same thing, but this village just does it a little bit different than the next one, and they want to be more different, so they develop their own thing. That's how I feel that the Polynesian nation was, right?
Hmm.
If you wanted to experience how it's done on the Ha'amoa Islands, you go to that part of the Polynesian Empire. If you wanted to go see how the Hawaiians did it, something, or the Tahitians, but we were all unified. We were all one nation. Even Captain Cook himself, in his journals, says he was shocked that this nation spread out throughout the entire ocean. He said
Yeah.
they spoke the same language, they had the same religion, they had the same social structure. Captain Cook even called us a nation
Mm,
because he was like, these are the same people. I've
mm.
gone all over the place. These are the same people. They behave the same way, they talk the same way. This is just like going from the modern United Kingdom. You go to Scotland, yeah, they're a little different, but they're still part of the United Kingdom. You go to
Yeah.
England, you go to Wales, yeah, there's unique things amongst them, but they're also unified as the United Kingdom.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, that's to me when I see that is like, oh, when you say 60% Samoa, oh, you're from the Samoan village and the Tongan village. We're all the same people.
and the Chinese. How do you know me? That's the laborers that came to Ha'amoa then, eh? And brought the
Mm-hmm.
sapasui. Brought the
Somebody,
sapasui.
yeah,
Eh?
which is
Yeah,
good
just a
stuff.
good. Would you? Yeah, just a little joke there. How do you know me, Maro?
Malo. All right, I'll read through this one. Tuikana the current king of Tonga, Taufa'ahau Tupou the Fourth, is the 22nd in the Tuikana line. This royal family line of Tonga was founded in a direct connection to Samoa. Once again,
Mm,
we understand it's being treated as Samoa as a separate nation, but it was within the same nation. It's just from the islands group. that the
Yes.
Tongans typically called Ha'amoa.
Yeah.
In the middle part of the 17th century, the Tu'iha Takalaua, a line of ruling chiefs that had split from the Tu'itonga 6 generations earlier, married a Samoan woman named Limapo from Safata on Upolu. As part of her wedding dowry, Limapo brought with her to Tonga an exquisite Samoan fine mat she named Manea Fainga.
Mm.
Limapo and Takalaua had a son named Ngata, who became a powerful chief and eventually split from the Tu'iha Takalaua line to create a new line of chiefs in Tonga. Ngata was often called the Tongan Kanu Kupolu, flesh of Upolu, in honor of the islands his mother came from. The new line of chiefs was called the Tu'ikanu Kupolu. At his investiture ceremony, Ngata wore the Samoan fine mat Manea Fainga'a, which his mother had brought with her. The present king of Tonga, at his investiture ceremony in 1967, 22 generations later, was presented with the same Samoan fine mat, Manea Fainga'a. Both the fine mat and the name of his title show a direct link to Samoa.
Yep. Yep.
Couple interesting things I want to add here. Once again, the narrative here makes it sound like separate nation Samoa, separate nation Tonga, and there
Mm.
was a link in there. We dispute that, right? This
Yep.
is no different than one village marrying into another village. The other thing that our oldest brother Daniel was here, spent some time with him. We're
Yep.
really trying to work out where we can have him have more episodes. It's proving to be challenging, primarily because internet connectivity can be a challenge. But there were a couple things that I thought were interesting. First
Hmm.
off, they make it sound here that Ngata um, developed himself as a chief and then created the
Yeah.
Tu'ikanukupolu line. That's not the case, right? The Tu'iha Takalaua made one of his sons the
Correct.
Tu'ikanukupolu. This is if the Tu'iha Takalaua said there's never gonna be a Tu'ikanukupolu, we wouldn't have a Tu'ikanukupolu today. So
Correct.
this kind of narrative here makes it seem like the Tu'ikanukupolu wrestled out of the Tu'iha Takalaua a new chiefly line or kingly line, but that's not the case. Go
Tua,
ahead,
just to
Masi.
add on real quickly, this is what we talked about with the oral stories,
History.
right? The
Yes.
history. There's the oral history from Tongatapu, then there's the oral history from Upolu. And then it's
Yes.
you, the viewers, will have to navigate which
Uh,
oral history is sound and makes sense and which one you take. It's just part of that oral history like we talked about.
no, 100%, right? Because if you're from Upolu or Ha'amoa,
Yes.
what side of the oral history are you going to push? Oh yeah, we pulled
Correct.
that out of the Tu'iha Takalaua, right? We developed it, and then from the Tongan side is like, no, we created it because it was the guy's son,
Yes.
right? And the
Yes.
Tu'iha Takalaua wanted to be a little bit more achy, meaning
Yes.
I not to have the responsibility of the work, because
Yes.
the Tu'iha Takalaua did a lot of work. The
Yes.
Tu'itonga created the Tu'iha Takalaua to take care of the inasi, to take care of the administrative work. And here's a couple interesting things that Danny mentioned, Masi.
What's up?
The reason why Ngata was given the name Ngata. And ngata like your power. Ngata means
Mm.
has a limit. It has an
Yes.
end. So
Yes.
ngata was given that title because this is where your power or influence ends. It only
Mm.
comes up to this
We've set
point.
a limitation. This is your limit.
Correct. This is your function. So that's where the name ngata comes from, right? So the nickname of the Tu'ikanu Kupolo today, which is why Tupo, let's change the view here real quick.
Hmm.
Right? It's Tupo.
Yes.
Okay. Danny shares the reason why it's called Tupo because there were two brothers The older brother should have been the heir to the
Like
Tu'ikanukupolu.
the previous titles of the Tui Hatagalawa and the Tui Tonga. It's always kind of
Correct. Two
right.
siblings.
Yes.
However, you know how we talked earlier about the Tongan social and political structure, the intermarrying was
Mm,
important, right? However, the Tupo Lahi, his younger brother, had married into the Tu'ihatakalaua line, and they felt that that was a closer tie to the Tu'ihatakalaua. It was Kostler family.
mm, mm,
So it made it that the preference was make the younger brother the Tu'ikanukupolu, even though it belonged. And Tupo Lahi, who was the heir, says, okay, I'm okay with that.
mm.
So in honor of Tupo's choice to say, yeah, I'll let my younger brother, because it
Okay.
made more sense politically for the
Yes.
relationship of the
Strategically.
Tu'iha
Yeah.
Takalaua and the Tu'ikanukupolu, because the Tu'iha Takalaua would give direction to the Tu'ikanukupolu. That's where the name of Tupo comes from, the
Mm,
nickname. Danny says that the nickname of the Tu'ikanukupolu before that was Mataele.
mm.
And the origin, just like Tu'ikanukupolu, it was
Yeah.
Kanome Upolu, but they
Mm,
shortened it to Kanokupolu.
mm,
Mataele was Mata Kihekerekere, meaning
mm.
the job of the Tu'ikanukupolu was manage the land.
Mm.
Man, that's the administrative responsibility
The day
of the
to day. Yeah.
Tu'ikanukupolu.
Mm.
Day-to-day administration. That's why it was a difficult role,
A
because
working
you're
role. A very
running
working.
the
Yeah.
empire, right? You're doing the day-to-day management of the empire. What he also said was very interesting. There are examples where the Tu'ikanukupolu later became the Tu'ihatakalaua,
Mm.
like Muriki Ha'amea. Muriki
Yes.
Ha'amea apparently was Tu'ikanukupolu before he became Tu'ihatakalaua.
Mm.
And the reason was, and this is interesting, Masi, because this has
Yeah.
challenged some of the things you and I have thought of.
Yeah.
So what that shows is there was not a conflict for many generations between the Tu'ikanukupolo and the Tu'ihatakalawa. It was the same family. It was the
Mm.
same family. And there were some people, because of certain instability in the Tu'ikanukupolo, there are certain people from the Tu'itonga and the Tu'ihatakalaua line that should have been the Tu'ikanukupolo or were offered the Tu'ikanukupolo, and they said no.
Mm.
They said, why am I gonna it for them? They viewed it as a step down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're gonna make me, I'm the grandson of the Tu'itonga directly. You're gonna make me the Tu'ikanukupolo, and I have to go work every day. I have to manage the empire, I have to manage the Inasi. So there was actually that, even within those families, the Tu'ikanukupolo was not the preferred role. And there were certain, like Muliki Ha'amea, because of their dedication to the empire, they said, I will go down and I'll be the Tu'ikanukupolo, and I will run it. And then when the right time comes and we find a good person to be the Tu'ikanukupolo, I will go and be the Tu'ihatakalaua. But until we find that right person, they will go
Oh,
in.
man.
So
Interesting.
that makes it very interesting. Now, you know how you and I know this is kind of going a little longer than I had thought. You know how we've always talked about the Matai voting system for the Tu'ikanukupolo?
Correct.
Danny's perspective is the original for many generations for the Tu'ikanukupolo, it was father to son, father to son, father to son, father to son.
How long did that last? That would be my question.
It
Before.
was, I want to say, like anywhere between 5 to 10 generations,
Okay. Okay.
right? It was consistent.
Okay.
Then there was an issue. I forgot the term. It wasn't that there was an issue. What happened was There were two generations in a row. Shoot, I forgot the term. There's a specific term where there's
Mm.
only one child.
Okay.
There were two generations in a row where there was only one child, which means they had to go further back up into the genealogy to find a replacement.
Mm.
And because they were very specific in trying to make the marriages work, so that you don't want a younger line or a younger ranked person to be the tuiha takalaua, and then have a higher ranked person blood wise in the family and so forth
Mm.
to be the
Mm.
tuikan kupolu, because then it would be the higher or lower rank trying to give direction to a
Yeah.
older rank, and it wouldn't
Yeah.
work, right?
Mm.
So what happened was there were two generations where this happened. And so when they went back up to try and find someone, they didn't manage the marriages as closely.
Mm.
So they had a really difficult time trying to fill the Tui Hatakalaua, the Tui Kanukupolu, because there were so many people that could have made a claim.
Okay.
And then it became unstable. And then you had to get all the group of those people to agree, kind of like a Matai system, but
Mm.
it wasn't organized to be a Matai system. It just got so chaotic because there were two generations of only one heir or only
Yeah.
one
Offspring.
offspring. It led to too many people having laying claim on it, that you had to get everyone to agree. This is the one we all agree will be the Tuikanukupolu, so that no one else would challenge it and create instability.
Mm.
Interesting, which is very
Very
different
interesting.
from
Yeah.
many other historians we've spoken to. But
Mm.
like we said, we throw in all the different ideas.
Yeah.
Everyone can think about it, discuss it. I don't know. I thought I'd throw that out. Mussy, any
No,
thoughts?
that is interesting. Thank you for that. No, that's interesting too, because so it was practice father to son in the Tuican Polo line for some 6 to 10 generations, and then the the heirs was only like there was a lot of becoming like one only child from like an offspring, right? That
Yeah,
happened quite a few times. That obviously when that offspring didn't make it or whatever, or it lasts as long, then you have a wider family that can have claim to be the next title holder. Is that correct?
exactly.
Kind of. Okay.
Yes. And then to compound that even further, Masi, some of the people they put in at Tuikanukupolu were weak leaders.
Mm.
And I guess Danny said the 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 historical way of saying, if it doesn't go father to son, father to son, father to son, the Tongan perspective is, if you bring in another Tuikanukupolu who didn't inherit from his father, it's considered a new line,
Mm.
right?
Okay.
It's considered a new line because they didn't go from father to son. And they had a handful of consecutives where it wasn't father to son, which further led the instability.
Mm.
So this is why it makes sense, or at least could partially explain how Tupo the First was at least able to maintain it. It wasn't father to son because Tupo the First outlived so many of his children, but at least went from father to grandson.
Yeah. Mm.
Eh?
Yeah.
And then they say whakamau. That's when you whakamau a line, is when it goes at least from father to son. You have two generations of that. Then there's no longer a dispute. That other people
Yeah.
cannot have a claim. Osialu, father to son.
Mm.
Now there's stability. Now there's that line is established and it continue, which is why the current kingly line we have now
Yeah.
is established.
Mm.
This further explains why Queen Salote was in a very precarious situation.
Mm.
It was going to go through a transition where it wasn't going to be father to son.
Yes. Yeah.
So the Tuikanukupolu line in theory, the line had become unstable. So if there was anyone who could lay claim on the Tuikanukupolu line, Queen Salote was vulnerable.
Mm.
So what's their solution? Marry her to the heir of the Tuiha Takalawa,
Yeah,
which solidifies Queen Salote's position
it's
to
legitimate.
remain as the monarch.
Yeah,
Right? And then
yeah,
now you could make the argument it's not the Tuikanukupolu who's in charge now because you inherit from your father, and this current king, his dad, is a descendant from the Tuiha Takalawa,
yeah.
so
From
he's
Muar.
technically the Hui
Yeah.
Takalawa. Anyways,
Mm.
thought that was interesting. Any
That is
thoughts
very
on that?
interesting. No, thank you for sharing too. It provides some clarity and other ideas that our viewers and everyone can think about. Like I said, this is the platform for it. So, malo.
Yeah. Another interesting, just quick comment here. I highlighted here. This here they talk about all the different marriages of the Tuitonga to Ha'amoa. It's pretty
Yeah.
well documented. One of the
Hmm.
things that was interesting, he says, Samoans I have consulted could remember a number of historic Samoan Tongan marriages, but had difficulty thinking of any Samoan Fijian marriages, which once again
It's
goes to this
lower.
idea that it's
Yeah.
always mythic, right?
Mm,
It's always like more about Tevolo and some
mm.
crazy idea and not practical. So I
Yes.
highlighted that because I thought that was interesting.
Yes, and another thing, right? A person from Ha'amoa in Upolu and Sabai or Tutuila and stuff will always look to Tonga to marry off their daughters, and then
Yeah.
if they couldn't get anybody, then maybe Fiji. But
Then you look
not
local. Yeah.
surprising. Yeah.
Read through this, Masi. There are a couple
All
things.
right.
Maybe when we read through it, I highlighted it for a reason, but let's have you read through it.
Let's go. The Tongan War, the single most written about event in the pre-contact relationship between Tonga and Samoa is the Tongan War. During this period, it is said that Tongan established some kind of control over Samoa. Most sources concur that this war took place in the 13th, 14th century. Ella, 1899, Fa'atonu, 1998, Khmer, 1994. These are the references. Malaysia, 1987, Stilbo, 1995, Turner, 1984. Samoan oral traditions record that record record that Tongans launched an invasion of Samoa and successfully took control for a time until Tuitonga Talagay Faiki was forced out of Samoa by the brothers Tuna and Fata, founders of the Marietoa line. Appendix Legend 33. The genealogies of both the Tuitonga and Marietoa lines agree almost exactly on the names and generations of the main characters involved in the Tongan War. This is fairly strong evidence that some kind of important conflict took place, indicative of the kind of regular and extensive contact that may have existed between these two archipelagos in the past.
Okay. I'm wondering if the reason why I highlighted this is
Some of the marriages between.
yes, some of the marriages, but like right here, right? Tuitonga Talakai Faiki, right? This is the
Mm-hmm.
one from Legend 33, Marietoa.
Mm-hmm.
Marietau, he's the one that says it. And
Yes.
everyone, remember, some people were kind of poking back at us when we said it's just a little scuffle. It wasn't
Yes.
a war,
Yes.
full scale war. And once again, even in the oral history itself, Talakai Faiki never said, I'm leaving. I'm
Yeah,
never
he's gonna
coming
come
back.
back.
He said, I'll come back, but when I come back, I'll be your friend. Right?
Correct.
And this is where the Sa comes from, right? From
Mm-hmm.
what I understand, the Sa starts because
Yeah.
of this, because some of them were like, oh my gosh, they might be coming back.
Yeah.
All right. And so they put that. But what I'm getting to is this is Talakai Faiki. There's stories that he comes back to Hamoa anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which goes to show this wasn't a full scale war. This
Yeah.
was an incident that happened, and further explains why Talakai Faiki was like, hey, good job, guys. Whatever. For
Yeah.
whatever reason,
Yeah.
he was impressed.
Yeah.
And then further explains why he gave that title. and why it became important. But look at what happens. Where is it? Right here. Tuitonga Uraki Mata.
Sapio
This is
Moa.
after 5 years. This is
Yes,
Telea. They
yes,
lived in
correct,
Haamoa 5 years,
correct.
and this is after Talakay Paiki.
Yeah, and that goes along with what we've been saying with the five generation of the Tuitonga living in
Yeah,
Haamoa after the
living in
fact.
Haamoa. So
Mm.
so once again, I think this is important. Even if you just pay attention, this is where if you just pay attention to the history and the genealogy, even within that, you can be like, wait a second. This oral history right here says an invasion, right? An invasion of Haamoa. You notice they say here they don't agree what kind of the extent of the war. They just agree on the main characters and when it
Yes,
happened,
yes,
right?
yeah.
Because this is a lot of people don't like King Afa, but he makes a good point when he says, "Why didn't they kill Talakay
Yeah,
Faiki? Because that wasn't the intent. You kill the Tuitonga. Not only will the armies from Tonga and the rest of the empire who are loyal, who have intermarried to the Tuitonga, you're not just going to get Tonga. You're going to get Uvea, Futuna. You're going to get all the guys from Fiji. You're going to
yeah,
get like this. It's almost like a suicide to kill
yeah,
Talakai Faiki. But if you just wanted to prove a point to be like, Siana, you're overbearing.
yeah,
You're overbearing
yeah.
on the people,
It was a
you
little far
know,
more fishy kind of thing,
yes, yes. It was
you
just
know.
a physical
Re-
expression of frustration.
yes, rebellious attitude kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, but the point is the marriages continue and the
Mm.
Itonga continues to come back. And then once again, when you say invasion, the idea is that Tonga was a separate nation, Samoa was a separate nation, and there was an invasion. No, 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 no.
Correct.
There was an invasion. It's the same country. It's the
Yeah.
same people.
Mm.
It's just that village got sick and tired. Maybe Talakay Faiki was doing stupid stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
And they got tired of it and they said, we got to stand up for ourselves.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to oppress me to death, then I might as well fight you because
Fight
you're going
night.
to kill me anyway if
Yeah.
you keep
Mm.
oppressing me.
Mm.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I think that's why I highlighted this because right next to each other, the genealogy, which everyone agrees to, doesn't fit some of the oral description of what happened there.
Yeah. I concur. I agree.
Okay. Talks about what Tonga had. They go over of what the different things that Samoa, Fiji offered, right? They talk
Mm.
about Fiji offered all the
Resources, the
different
trees.
spices,
Yeah.
the trees. They talk about Hamoa had a lot of the mats and the
Mm-hmm.
stones, right? And then they talk about and these some things that stuck out to me that I thought were interesting that I never knew. It says here, what did Tonga have to offer? Fijian and Tongan traditions record that Tongans were often the source for highly prized whale teeth tabua in Fiji. I didn't know that.
Okay. Yeah. That's new.
But it makes sense when you step back. Who were the ones traveling long distances over deep waters would run
Yeah.
into whales,
Whales. Mm. Mm.
right?
Yeah.
That would make sense. In addition to trade objects, Tongans had a long tradition of offering their services as warriors in intra archipelago warfare. As discussed below, Tonga also appears to play an important intermediary role in the movement of goods and ideas through West Polynesia.
Yeah. That's pretty valuable, right? The ideas
Yeah,
of navigation,
yes,
probably. The ideas and goods
connecting
to
the islands.
yes.
And this
Yes.
also matches the archaeological studies on the axes, the stone
Yes.
axes, right?
Mm.
That in Tonga they found 66% of them. And it was probably, and in the study that we were going to go on later on today, there was so much movement on the outer islands. and very little movement of certain types of stone axes, even within Ha'amoa,
Mm,
right?
mm.
Just to kind of show like the flow of goods. Want to read these two, Masi?
Yes. So the relationship between Samoa and Tonga in the last 5 centuries has been governed by the Tulatala Compact, a kind of non-aggression pact that refers to the promise that the Tuitonga called out never to invade Samoa after being expelled from Samoa by Tuna and Fata. In
Have
Tonga,
you? Oh, go ahead.
oh,
Have you
go
heard
ahead.
of that? I'm not familiar with this.
No, no, no. I'm not too familiar with that saying they never invade Samoa, being expelled from Samoa by Tuna. No, because there's quite a few stories that it was not expelled. It was just he would always return, but in a friendlier manner, kind of
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, not
Anyway,
this one.
yeah,
Not this one.
interesting.
Yes,
Yeah, go on the next one here.
in Tonga, Captain James Cook was told in 1777 that Tongans had conquered Samoa, and the Tongan royal family of Paulaho lived there. Various whalers and traders reported that Samoans acted as mercenaries for intra-Tongan wars. An English traveler claimed that a fleet of 10 Tongan war canoes sacked the village of Falealupo in Savaii in 1827. This post-Tula-Tala Compact conflict may be indicative of previous pre-contact Tonga-Samoa tension.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Interesting there. Continue over here.
Okay. One of the more humorous incidents involved a fleet of 6 Samoan canoes carrying about 300 people that arrived in Tonga delivering the bride for the Tuitonga son. The Samoans participated in the wedding festivities, which involved club fighting for sport. Mariner observed that there was some confusion between the two parties as to whether they would follow the Samoan or Tongan rules for club fighting. As Mariner reported, the difference of which is that the Hamoa custom allows a man to beat his antagonist after he is knocked down, as long as he perceives signs of motion, while the Tonga mode only allows him to flourish his club over his fallen foe, and the fight is ended. Hmm. No, you know what that reminds me too of the certain class of how you present yourself. Samoans are a little bit savage, more like behavior when they have their sport. No, that's what I'm thinking, right? After you
Yeah.
beat him, then you can just keep beating him as long as he can move his finger. He's still alive, right? He's still moving. The Tongan one is you knock
Once
him
he's
down.
down, he's done.
It's a lot more. It's a lot more. I don't know. It's a behavior of just a certain higher class of entertainment. You know
Hmm.
what I mean, Tua? It's
Yeah.
more civilized. It just that I find that very interesting. But I just thought I'd share that. I don't know if you had anything on that what I just
No,
read.
I mean I agree. I mean that's it's understanding that this is sport. Sport is for entertainment, not for the destruction of life,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And so that's the difference there. So
yeah.
this one is pretty much talking about the local konga that you told me, which I didn't know until
Yes.
you brought it up.
Yeah.
Um,
With
that
the
there was,
Wesleyan Church.
yeah, they talk about it's telling that do not express particular surprise at a canoe large enough to hold 150 people,
Mm,
right? Kind of talking about the size of the canoes. Um, Let me see here. They talk about some blue beads that
nice.
people in Manua, women in Manua, were wearing, and they say they got it from Tonga. And these
Mm,
oblong beads the Tongans got. The reason why I highlighted this is they said, "Oh, Tatui Tonga never set foot in Manua." Well, we're over here reported a young woman in Manua wearing a string of oblong blue beads. They said they were out of place, and they said that it was high value to them, and they said they got it from the Tongans.
there we go.
So obviously there was interactions with the people in Manua with the
Yes.
Tongans.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's why that was highlighted in there for me. See right here, being told by Samoans that the beads came from Tonga.
Yep.
Uh,
It seems like there was no scuffle. That's why it was just always just a peace and a respect. There's a lot of
yeah,
the scuffling kind of habit in Upolu and Sabai. It seems like.
yeah. Um, Says these examples show that in historic times, contact between Tonga and Samoa by means of traditional canoes is well documented, but again, there does not appear to be an uh, as extensive a network of early historic connections between Fiji and Samoa,
Hmm.
right? So even the Europeans were like, Tonga and Samoa is super active in between each other.
Yep.
There's not
Yep.
a lot of high documentation of Samoa and Fiji.
Hmm.
There's also documentation of Tonga and Fiji,
Correct. Well, why is that,
right?
right? Like we said, the
Exactly.
roads, the roads all lead to Tongatapu, right?
Exactly.
The Tongatapu can connect easily with the
Everyone
various
else.
islands. Yes.
Yes. So once again, that to me is very telling. It says there is also no record of a significant interaction between Samoa and more distant archipelagos of East Polynesia in early historic accounts, although Williams reported a Vavae man living in Manua in 1832 who claimed to be the sole survivor from a canoe blown off course from Tubuai. Once again, that's not intended arrival in Manua. That was blown off
Accident.
course.
By accident. Yep.
Yes. Um, so they go over some archaeological stuff. They talk about some of the sources here and then the architecture.
I'm going to read
Uh,
that.
Yeah, read through the conclusions. We're kind of getting towards the end here, I believe. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Conclusions. Compelling evidence of pre-contact interactions in West Polynesia. We have established that Tonga and Fiji is mentioned in almost 40% of the Samoan legends we analyzed. At the very least, this demonstrates that pre-contact Samoans were well aware of the existence of Tonga and Fiji. Drawing on European accounts, we have documented regular canoe voyaging between these archipelagos, or at least through Tongan as an intermediary.
There we
Yep.
go.
Yeah. In early historic times, we have also presented evidence that trade of goods and exchange of spouses was well established by the time of European contact. Finally, archaeology
And I would pause
provide.
it right there, real quick, Masi.
Mhm.
Once again, the well documented marriages are not with Samoa and Fiji, it's with Tonga and Samoa.
Correct.
But where is it
Correct.
also well documented? Tonga and Fiji, with Sakuli
Yes.
Tonga's family marrying into Fiji. Once
Fiji's high
again,
class. Yeah.
who's the intermediary? Who is the connecting
Yeah.
islands between Samoa and Fiji?
It's
It's
Tonga.
Tonga. Yeah,
Yes.
go ahead.
Finally, our archaeology provides us with empirical evidence of connections between Samoa and West Polynesia through province analysis of basalt artifacts, which strongly supports the existence of regular inter-archipelago voyaging and communication in West Polynesia. The nature of Samoa's
Just
pre what was that to him?
just pause that once again. I just have to re-emphasize this
Yes,
because you need to realize what's being said here. Which strongly supports the existence of regular inter-archipelago voyaging and communication in West Polynesia. Yes, but what is the flow of the communication?
through
Samoa
Tonga.
to Tonga to Fiji,
Fiji.
from Fiji to Tonga to Samoa. Like that's
Yes,
the flow. If you just read this on its own, it makes it sound like, oh yeah, we were saying everybody was going. No, they consistently are saying Tonga was the intermediary there.
yes, yeah. No, great point, Tua. The nature of Samoa's pre-contact interaction with Tonga may have been different than with Fiji.
There we go.
There we go.
Um, let's go through this one, Masi.
Okay. What what could account for this difference in the role of Tonga and Fiji in Samoan oral traditions? Perhaps the Samoan connections to Fiji have always been limited Perhaps there was an older connection that has been supplanted in more recent pre contact times by Tonga. In reviving the Samoan oral traditions of Fiji, one gets the sense that they tell of Fiji as if they were hearing about Fiji secondhand from someone else. Possibly much of the Fijian presence in Samoan oral traditions comes through Tonga as an intermediary. Indeed, extensive direct contacts have been shown in pre-contact and historic times between Tonga and Fiji, especially the easternmost Lao group in Fiji. But very little evidence for direct contact between Samoan and Fiji has been found in our study. In the simplest terms, geography, along with distance and configuration of islands, places Tonga in the middle of interactions between the main archipelagos of the region. The effects of the geography alone are shown in models of connectivity. Yep.
Okay. So now you can understand why in Ha'amoa their ideas of Fiji are almost like mythical. Eh? Because
Mm,
they're it sounds like, and that's why they're getting these conclusions. It's because it was the Tongan warriors who would go fight in Fiji and probably telling the stories of like, dude, there's these people in Fiji. They are cannibals. They do voodoo. You know what I mean? There's all this crazy stuff. So
they're
it's
dark.
the
They're much
Tongans.
darker than us. They have a fizzy
Yes,
hair.
yes, right. And so they're coming back and telling those in Ha'amoa, like, hey, this is what's going on. And then that's reflected in the oral history and what's told about what
Mm,
Fiji is about.
mm,
Okay.
mm.
Now, you know what makes that interesting? That's
What's that?
why like some of the stories about the origin of tattooing and
Mm,
coming from Fiji. But if we look at this, the only real contact Fiji and Ha'amoa had was through Tonga.
yeah, yeah.
So one
And
could
then
make yeah. So it's very interesting that if you guys did have extensive contact with Fiji, it's because it came through Tonga,
via
or at
Tonga.
least that's
Yeah.
what this is kind of pointing towards.
Mm, interesting. Did you want me to start on the next paragraph too?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. The
Go ahead.
notion of Tonga as an intermediary in both trade and cultural diffusion is not a new one and is usually described as the Tongan Maritime Empire, asserting Tongan domination, whether in actual political power or through cultural or economic influence, or nearby archipelagos. This extended imperial influence in the region could facilitate the movement of goods and ideas to islands that have little or no direct contact. As Swanee and Groves 1998 most convincingly portray the environmental circumstances that favor an outward looking and expansionist Tonga, which could have provided information about Fiji to Samoa. Indeed, when discussing Samoan views on cannibalism, whaler J. W. Osborne wrote in 1835, they often have heard of the Fijis from Tongatapu people who visit here often. They cannot bear the idea of being thought cannibals. The influence of Tonga as a second-hand source of knowledge about Fiji and a lack of direct Samoa Fiji contact may account for the mystical and far removed role that Fiji tends to play in Samoan oral traditions. Archaeological evidence has long supported the idea that Samoa, Tonga, Fiji were most extensively connected at the earliest colonization times about 3,000 years ago, followed by a waning of interconnections as archipelagos became more independent and self sufficient. While archaeological evidence offers insight over extended periods of time, the use of oral traditions and early historic evidence allows us to better characterize, even if not so concretely, the more recent relationship between Samoa and its neighbors. If Samoa, Tonga, Fiji were all closely interconnected. During their initial colonization phase, it appears that Samoa has maintained closer ties to Tonga, as recorded by oral traditions and early historic evidence. Little evidence of direct pre-contact interaction between Samoa and Far East Asia, Polynesia.
Yeah. Any thoughts, or you're good to proceed? I mean,
Um,
it's pretty self-evident. I mean, it's the pattern is getting pounded into you. Like there becomes pretty obvious, right? There's
yes,
like Tonga was the center, the spoke of the wheel.
yes. Well, and that's the other thing too is Fiji, Fiji, Fiji's connections to Samoa is it seems like to the whole like the knowledge of navigating I like at ease was the knowledge that Tongans maintain to themselves. Maybe I feel like Tua maintain to themselves
Hmm.
because it seems like I'm sure there are Samoans that would go because we have stories of Samoans or Samoa coming to the other islands, but going the knowledge to going to Fiji, there seems to be not a very common. It's always right? It's the same thing with Fiji. Fiji coming
Yeah.
to Tonga,
Well,
Samoa coming
it's
to Tonga, but Tonga having the knowledge to go to Hawaii, go to Cook Island, go to um, you know Fortuna and
mhm.
Fiji. It's Samoa. That's I don't know that's what it seems like that the Tongans
Yes.
maintained.
Well, the thing is, and that's why I like to say, like, I want all the viewers and the listeners to say, like, when we say Tonga, we're just trying to say the capital, right? The
Yes,
capital
uh, uh,
had the bigger library of how to get to
yes,
different places.
yes,
And it was a library of knowledge that certain family groups had. So obviously, when those families on Tongatapu are marrying into Ha'amoa, well, guess what? Some of that knowledge would go there, right? And a lot
mm,
of that knowledge would be, oh, we have family in Tongatapu, so we know how to get there. We might have
yes.
some family in Uvea, there were some who
We
get
know how
there.
to get.
But we don't have any real business getting to Fiji. So we don't get that knowledge, right? And
Mm,
so the this is where we're all talking about the all roads lead to Tongatapu. That's why they had all the different stones. That's why they had all the different styles of houses, right?
yes.
The Wharefakamanu, you can have all the knowledge and the stuff came
the
to
different
Tonga.
the different dances too,
The
the
different
Hamoa
dances.
dances, and then there's the
Yes.
dances from the Futuna and Uvea. Like, yeah, I mean, you can go on. It
And
was just
yeah,
like a
and
melting pot.
exactly. And so is it true about the navigational knowledge,
Mm,
right?
mm,
There's a reason why the Haamonga is on Tongatapu and not somewhere else,
yes.
right? There's a reason why all the Langis are on Tongatapu and not somewhere else. There's a reason why the 100-acre man-made land reclaimed from the ocean is on Tongatapu and not found somewhere else,
Mm,
right? And there's a reason why all the flow of the goods and the ideas was through Tonga and not through somewhere else.
yeah.
But we were all one
Yes.
nation, one people. Certain families had these types of knowledge and influence, not all, but the little bit of knowledge and influence through the intermarrying through Tongatapu meant iyo. Some people on the outskirts of the empire would have access on how to get to certain places.
Yep. Yep.
You want
Want me
me to
to read that
continue?
one? I
Yeah,
can
let
read
me.
that one too.
Okay, go ahead.
However, it is striking how little connectivity Samoa shows with the what is that? I can't see the logo
More
coming. The
distant.
more distant archipelagos of East Polynesia. This is not to discount any possibility of interaction between these places. Indeed, basalt artifacts sourced to both Samoa and the Society Islands have been excavated in the Cooks, suggesting a possible intermediary role similar to the described above for Tonga. However, that far east Polynesia is not remembered in Samoan oral traditions, or at least the oral traditions analyzed in this study. While Tonga and Fiji are mentioned again and again, strongly suggests that any contact with East Polynesia was much less extensive. Indeed, it appears from oral traditions that the existence of the more remote parts of East Polynesia may not have been recalled in pre contact Samoa. This may not be especially surprising since the distances between East and West Polynesia are substantially greater than within West Polynesia. As Irwin 1992 shows, this result is much smaller voyaging target angles from West Polynesia to the far away islands of East Polynesia, from Samoa to the Societies as compared with 55° from Tonga to Samoa, making voyaging significantly more difficult than within West Polynesia. Perhaps
Want
the
to
lack
pause
of
it? Pause it real
okay,
quick, Masi.
yep,
This is why the Tuitonga said, Eastern Polynesia, you guys all don't have to come to Tonga twice a year. It
mm,
was extremely burdensome because not only are you traveling, but you're supposed to bring all the
bring
gifts,
yes,
all the produce, all that stuff. And I'm wondering that the Cook Islands or Lalotonga was called Lalotonga
mm,
because that was the intermediary point from East Polynesia, and Lalotonga, below Tonga or under Tonga, meaning okay, Tonga, but you're gonna function as a Tonga,
yeah,
as a meeting point to bring all that stuff before it's taken. I don't know. That was just some of the thoughts that came to my
yep,
mind.
yep. No, and just like the connections, right, with East Polynesia, Tonga, it's Tonga was that connection to East Polynesians. Had more, maybe a few that would sell, but it wasn't like a constant movement of back and forth like Tonga
Yeah,
was with East Polynesia. Because, like I said, we still have names from East Polynesia in Tonga,
and
Tapu,
Tonga.
as
Yeah,
as of today. Yeah.
yeah. No, 100%. Go ahead, Mas.
Perhaps the lack of Samoan oral traditions involving Far East Polynesia is a relatively recent phenomenon and represents a contraction of the voyaging sphere between West and East Polynesia. While the Tonga Samoa Fiji voyaging sphere remained active until historic times, in any case, our present
Do you see it?
study,
Mhm.
yep, present study has focused only on Samoan oral traditions. It would be interesting to investigate this question from the perspective of East Polynesia oral traditions. Indeed, on the map that Tupaya, a Tahitian navigator and priest, helped to draw for Captain Cook in 1769, one can find both Manua and Savai listed. Finally, our study has tried to demonstrate that evidence from oral traditions can be valuable tool in attaining a greater understanding of the picture that archaeological, linguistic, and early historic evidence paints of past interactions with Oceania.
Mm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
very
Mm.
interesting.
So it seems
So,
like the Eastern Polynesians, or at least this one navigator, was
Tupaya,
familiar with Manua.
yes, yes, and looks like put Savai. So obviously, they knew there were islands there, but it's funny because they say I'm surprised they put Savai. Well, right, they put Savai there because they knew that was a very historical place. Because it makes me think of the Pulimele, where the Tuitonga used to live five
Yeah.
generations. So to me, if you're in the other parts of the Tuitonga Empire, you got to know where the Tuitonga is living, where most of the days except the Polo Polo and the Inasi. So Savai is an important figure with
Well,
the Puri
not
Malay.
only that, but Manua, because was it was who was the Tuitonga? I mean, Kaulfonua Fekai, some of the oral history says that his mother was a Tui Manua.
And
And so
he
they
both
would,
he
and
held
he
both.
held it and could have been in Manua. So they would have
That's
known of
true.
Manua if we
Yes.
follow your logic, right,
Yes.
that they knew those places because at certain times the Tuitonga resided in those areas.
Mm.
So interesting.
Very interesting.
Let's see if I have anything else highlighted here. No, oh, these are
Very
the
informative,
stories.
man. Very
Very
informative and very
interesting.
good.
I think this is the rest of this is like the stories themselves.
Mm. Of the actual what they've recorded from various people in
These are the
South
oral histories that they
oral history.
recorded and walked through and analyzed. So, anyways, looks like oh my gosh, yeah, we're not going to get to the second study, but the second study that we were going to looked at archaeological evidence that showed the same thing. See, this is what was interesting. They just looked at the oral history,
Mm.
and then you look at the archaeological evidence, it matched what they were
Yes.
saying, right?
Yeah.
Stone from Fiji, stones from different parts of Fiji, stones from Ha'amoa, stones, flakes from the Cook Islands. You find it all in Tonga.
The genealogy of the marriages, and it reaches that five. What we say from our oral history that the Tuitonga stayed in Ha'amoa. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it matches that time frame, and it's the same archaeological evidence with the Purimede because it
Yes.
dates to that time frame. So it's like you can piece them together.
Yeah. And I really like the comment that you said earlier, Masi. And I think, you know, that could be a t shirt coming up here is, the Polynesianized podcast, Navigating History, right? Because that's what we're
Mm,
doing. Our
yes.
ancestors navigated the great oceans to connect each other because we were all one big nation, one big family. And how you maintain those relationships, it was navigating the ocean. Now that we're far away from those times where we know every corner of the ocean, we have GPS.
Mm,
Now it's navigating and maintaining our relationships throughout Polynesia, the Polynesian nation, by navigating the oral history, the scientific studies, looking at the genealogy to reconnect us as Polynesians in the modern world
yeah.
to help maintain the relationships within the Polynesian nation. So that's my closing comment, Masi. Hand it over to you to say whatever you have and close us out.
All right. Well, thank you, Tua, for bringing and organizing this on this digital live cover session on the Polynesianized podcast. I appreciate all the viewers and their questions. It was very good to have a live interaction and discussion. I appreciate everyone's contribution into the Polynesianized podcast. I'm gonna leave you two things like we always do. Stay curious and ask the hard questions. Until the next one. See ya.
Peace.